We're going to fix that. Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Destin City Council, July 6, 2020, to order. First up, we do not have a pastor here, so if you'll lead us in the pledge, sir. Thank you, sir. Up first is the agenda approval, and you want to go ahead?
Yeah, Mayor, I would like to have an opportunity to move the public comments down and just swap it with 3, and then we'll move 3A and B in place of number 2, just so we can get the proclamations and give Mr. Maddox an opportunity to speak at the beginning.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second. Do we need to vote on that? Okay. Is there anything else that anyone would like to change on the agenda before we take that to a vote? Okay. Seeing none, Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Menchel? Try it again. You're muted.
We read your lips.
No, he's got to go. No. Still no sound. Stay there, Steve. I'm going to go down the list and I'll come back to you. Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Marler.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Menchel. You still having issues?
Mr.
Just-
Menchel, if you could click
just-
the red microphone next to your name, please.
Click your red microphone next to your name.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. I clicked my blue microphone. I'm good. It said I was muted by the organizer. Now I'm unmuted. Thank you.
Okay, do you agree with the change of order? Oh, we lost you again.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thanks. All right. So, first up, approval of the minutes of June 15, 2020, regular city council meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion, got a second. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marler?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Braden? Okay, up second is number 1B, approval of minutes of April 6, 2020, regular city council meeting.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
I'll second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Mr. Braden? Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marler?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
So moved. All right, next up, we have a proclamation from the Parks and Recreation Month. Do you want me to stand up and read that, or do we just keep our social distancing? How do you want to do that, Catherine? You usually want to take a picture? All right, we'll go up there. City of Destin Proclamation, Parks and Recreation Month. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the City of Destin, and whereas our parks and recreations are vitally important to establishing and maintaining a quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region, and whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreational service for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas the parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction, And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, they protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecology, beauty of our community, and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July 2020 as Park and Recreation Month. And whereas the City of Destin recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreational resources, now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Mayor Gary Jarvis, on behalf of the Destin City Council, do hereby designate the month of July 2020 as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Destin. We call upon park and recreation supporters to join us in recognizing the importance of our nation's parks and recreations. And I'll just present this proclamation to the head of our Parks and Recreation Task Force.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City. We're proud to represent, and I'm sure my team agrees with me. This is it's an honor, and we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. That's interesting. Next up, Mr. Maddox, you have the floor. By the way, welcome, and we appreciate all you do for our community.
Thank you so much. It's always wonderful for a change of scenery to come on out and see our friends in Destin. And good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. So here we are again, talking about the battle that we've been in for 4 months now. And to coin a phrase, I think we're all experiencing a bit of COVID fatigue. And of course, COVID fatigue meaning that I think we're all a little bit tired of what we've been seeing, what we've been hearing, and I know we can all say that we sure wish we weren't in this position now. But in order to combat that fatigue and to understand that we're not out of the battle yet, we've done a few things to refresh our graphics and give a fresh look. If you remember what the data used to look like coming out of our office, we would kind of take screenshots of the DOH dashboard, put them up there, and they began to get a little bit tedious, hard to read the data, and my ever-growing narrative at the bottom of that would just contain sentences to explain data and explain percentages, and I began to realize that it was becoming less effective when people would call me with questions about the data which was actually explained in the narrative, which means they weren't reading it. So with some excellent feedback, we produce a graphic which looks like this now, which you're all able to see. And for the folks at home, if they haven't been able to see it, it looks like that up on the board, which I think is a little bit more concise and captures the quantitative and qualitative data we're looking for, the key points that we kind of use as metrics to measure where we are at a snapshot in time. So to just give a brief of where we are, and I was able to put this out just about an hour or so before I came here. We were in budget hearings all morning today, so it was a long day. We are at 917 total positives right now in Okaloosa County, which was a gain of only 11. Some of the days that we've been up as high. I think we hit 71 on one day a couple of weeks back, and we've been anywhere between 11 on the low now and 71 on the high for several weeks now. And if we look at that, and we look at the total number tested and the total positives and negatives, which we also capture, the total number of tested now in Okaloosa County is 16,158. And the majority of those tests have really happened in the last couple of months through a partnership with the Department of Health, EMS, as well as some of the other local providers. But by far, DOH is doing the heavy lifting here, and EMS has stepped in to go ahead and assist them with that by providing crews at these stand-up spots that we have, the points of testing that we've been establishing throughout the county. Negatives, 15,226 for an overall positivity rate of 5.7%. Now, 5.7%, of course, below the 10% threshold that the state holds as the danger area, and that was again for the first time in a while today. There was a drop of 0.1%, which we were encouraged to see. Now, something that we also incorporated here is instead of just that overall positivity rate, which of course incorporates some of the very low data in the 3s and 2s that we had reached at some point, we included a weekly rolling positivity rate, so for the past 7 days, which gives us a little bit briefer snapshot in time and maybe something a little more relevant as to where we currently are. And that had reached at one point in the 11s, and of course that was very concerning, and today we were at 6.9% for the 7-day rolling positivity, which does show a decrease, and we're happy. That was a decrease of 1.3% from the previous day. That doesn't mean it's going to be that way tomorrow. As we can see, this data is not consistently trending yet. We need a good solid couple of weeks of data moving in the same direction before we can say we're comfortable that it's moving there and it's moving that way for a reason. The median age is something that has changed over the last few weeks, and right now we see the median age for Okaloosa County and Florida the same age of 39. Now, what's different between that and where we were in the beginning of this battle was that the age demographic was much older in the very beginning. We were looking at in the 60s for the beginning of this battle, and now that we're in the 30s, high 30s, early 40s. And some of the reason for that, we think, is that these are the folks that are out moving about now. The folks that are going back to work, the folks that are out socializing, and they're hitting this younger demographic, and that has been seen consistently throughout the state, and of course is mirrored here in Okaloosa County by that data. One of the concerning areas that we have right now is we do have some cases in long-term care facilities, and that's what we specifically wanted to keep COVID out of. And as of today, depending on which data you're looking at, we're somewhere between 47 and 53 cases actually inside long-term care facilities. There is, I believe, one long-term care facility that has the majority of those cases, and then several other long-term care facilities that have somewhere between 1 and 6. But there is one long-term care facility that has the majority of those cases, and I don't have the name of that facility with me today. When we look at something like that, although there are ACA mandates in place that have the long-term care staff and residents being tested every 2 weeks, which is a fantastic and labor-intensive effort, that does not stop the ability for COVID to get into these into these long-term care facilities by having either staff or other folks take it and bring it in asymptomatically, and there's no way to test for it at that point, until you come up on that 2-week test. So unless folks were being tested every day, it would be very, very difficult to detect an asymptomatic person that would walk it into a facility. So, the state has sent these incident management teams out there to begin identifying these problems. The Department of Health has been extremely effective in getting these things identified and addressed. And right now we are doing our best to drive COVID back out of the long-term care facilities where we have our most vulnerable population, those who are advanced in age, 65 years and older, or have underlying comorbidities and health conditions. Right now we are still at 8 total deaths. I do expect that number to rise, unfortunately. I think that's an inevitability. And it would be consistent with the region around us. I believe Santa Rosa is at 9. I believe Walton is at 9. And Escambia has elevated cases. I want to say they're getting close to 3,000 cases now and have somewhere in the neighborhood of 47 or 49 deaths in that region there now. So comparatively, we're nowhere near that at this point, but we are commensurate with the other 2 counties. Now, when we compare that to Florida as a whole, although we have 917 total positives, the total number of positives in Florida was 206,447. And that was a gain of over 6,000 from the previous date. So are the numbers going up statewide? Yes, they are. Is there an uptick, and has there been an uptick in positivity rate? Undeniable. And so what we need to do at that point is look at what the most effective mitigation measures are. And I think what the CDC and the DOH has been preaching up to this point is still absolutely the way to go. We have to look at what the NPIs are, which is the non-pharmaceutical interventions, your social distancing, your hygiene, not going places when you are sick. Believe it or not, we still have folks that are showing up to work sick in different places and thinking, oh, maybe it's just my seasonal allergies, or it's only a runny nose, or I only have a leg cramp. And, when you put these things in concert and they go back and they get tested, they're testing positive for COVID. So it's important that we remember the very basics that were being preached to us in the beginning of this. They're still effective, and they're still the best weapon we have in this fight. And as we move forward, DOH is driving very consistently, as well as other public health officials, the use of masks in public places where you can't socially distance. And I think that's important. Dr. Chapman brings that up very, very often. So if you are in a place where you can't be 6 feet away from someone else, when you get into the grocery stores, you get into the different businesses, it is important to wear those masks. And you'll see many of those businesses. I know my family was at the Commons over the weekend, and many of them you're not getting in without it. Whether there's an ordinance, a law, a directive or not, they've taken it upon themselves to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Have at it. That's the way to go for them. And of course, there are folks who believe that they don't need to wear that, and that's fine too. That's up to them at this point. There's the message out there that says that the mask is protecting your neighbor, not you, depending on the type of mask that you're wearing. So, that is something to take into consideration, and that's the debate that goes on in the public. So we leave that to the individuals at this point to make good decisions. And of course, you can imagine that will probably be a source of debate at different meetings to come. So rather than just stand up here and preach data to you, I think I've hit the points that are important there for you as far as the metrics are concerned. I wanted to open up a Q&A session for you because I'm sure there's much that you've been asked about, and I want to do my best to spend my valuable time up here for you answering those questions.
Council members? Go ahead, Rodney.
The tests that are coming back positive for the COVID, is that for the COVID virus or the COVID-19?
I'm sorry? I don't think I understood you.
Isn't there a COVID virus and then there's a COVID-19?
No, sir.
I think he's talking about antibodies versus active viral test.
COVID-19 is the name of the virus. The actual bug that causes it is SARS-CoV-2. So all of the tests are either going to be positive or negative for COVID-19. I think what you mean is the serology tests, like Mr. Destin was saying. So there's a difference between a test for the antigen, which is you currently shedding virus, or the antibody, which means you may have been exposed to it at some point but may not be currently positive. Is that what you're talking about? Okay. Yes. So the way that works is that there's the tests that test for the antigen, the PCR test, that's polymerase chain reaction, is something that where you get the oral swab or the nasopharyngeal swab, that they test that and it will let you know whether or not you are currently sick. And that is what the drive-through sites are doing, what the hospitals are doing, and that will tell you whether or not you are actually currently sick. Some of those test turnaround times we're seeing anywhere from 5, 9, 10 days for turnaround. The other test that you're talking about, the antibody test, is serology, that is blood-based, and that will let you know whether or not you currently have antibodies to the exposure of COVID-19. It doesn't mean you're currently sick. It means that your body has been exposed to it and you have developed antibodies to it. And also, at this point, we don't know how long that immunity is conferred. If immunity is conferred, it's a novel virus, so it's kind of up in the air.
So all the cases that you're documenting are COVID-19
These are
positives?
Yes, sir. This data does not include antibody tests, sir.
Do you know anything about Florida asking FEMA for 1,500 nurses?
1,500 nurses currently positive?
No, that's what the state of Florida was asking today, was for 1,500 nurses.
I know that there have been cases, that there have been missions put in through the Florida Department of Emergency Management by departments of health for additional nursing staff to go ahead and help with different functions from the Department of Health's, if that's what you mean as well there.
Yeah, I just heard today that they was asking Florida, I don't know if it's governor who, but was asking for 1,500 nurses, and I think it was more for giving the the regular staff, give them a break.
And they could certainly use it. But yeah, so I know that different Department of Healths have put in different missions for additional contact tracers or folks to assist with the points of collection. And depending on which region you're in and what version of that they're ramping up, they would be asking for different types of staff.
Good. Mr. Destin?
Thank you. Mr. Maddox, I appreciate you coming, and I always appreciate these updates. Over the last week, I've had an uptick in the questions from constituents with regards to testing facilities on where they might go if they are concerned that they could have caught COVID. Is there any county resource that we could direct them to let them know, hey, within Okaloosa County, we have open testing sites here, or here?
Yes, sir. So with the pop-up sites that we're doing, the points of testing with the Department of Health, we advertise those only about a week or 2 weeks in advance right now. The next ones that are coming up here, we have one coming up this Tuesday, tomorrow, from 4:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. at Northwest Florida State College, 100 East College Boulevard in Niceville. We have one this Thursday from 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Northwest Florida State College, 1170 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Fort Walton. So one in the Niceville campus, one in the Fort Walton campus. There are also other resources on our county website. We have a document which came from the Department of Health, which they will update as needed, and it shows all of the testing areas that are in the region. All the way, it goes from Pensacola, out to Destin, out to Fort Walton, Crestview, Defuniak Springs. This is available on our county webpage. The document looks like this, for those at home. And what you would do is when you go onto the county webpage, we have kind of a scrolling banner. So it'll be green when it starts out, and then it will eventually cycle. You have to wait a few seconds to red, and that's our COVID banner. When you click on that, there's a bunch of different buttons on the website. If you go to the one where I believe it says DOH testing schedule, and you click on that, that document will be there, and you'll be able to see the different dates. It'll tell you whether it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or by appointment only, whether you're symptomatic or asymptomatic or what for that, and it'll even have a phone number to call if you have a question.
That's great. Thanks for the information.
Yes, sir.
Steve, Skip, or Chatham, you have any questions for Mr. Maddox?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
First of all, Mr. Maddox, thanks as always to you and your staff for all your hard work. Building on what Councilmember Destin said, if in fact someone was sick and they went to the emergency room, are the hospitals in a position to give testing real time if they get an admission into the hospital?
Yes, sir. If you go to the hospital and you are symptomatic, they can test you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to you and your staff.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
When would those results be back?
Each one is a little bit different. I'd hesitate to give you a date. I know that with the increase in testing right now, it certainly has increased the turnaround times. We've seen anywhere from 5 to 7 days as a general amount of time that we tell you, but we've seen it come back longer than 7 days at this point.
Is that all you had, Ms. Ramsell? Go ahead.
So looking at the data on the Florida Department of Health website, it looks like we had a peak on the 20th, and then it dropped, and then we had another one on the 27th, and it's dropping again. Is that indicative of what y'all are feeling or what you believe is going to be happening?
There hasn't been a long enough trend in data for me to say that that's something that continues, or every now and then what we have, and we've heard the governor say this as well, is that there's a backlog of data that is dumped into the system and may account for some of those spikes, and there's not enough of a trend in that data to say, okay, you know, every 6 days that data is dumped, and on the 7th day we're going to get a big spike or something like that. There's just not enough time in there right now. We're, you know, probably in the 3rd or 4th week of larger increases that we would need to watch that a little bit further to see if there's a particular spike and then a decline. And some of the other anomalies that we'll throw into something like that is we just had a big 4th of July celebration. So is that going to change what we see in a week and a half, 2 weeks from now as those tests begin to come back? So that may throw a monkey wrench into that whole thing if we were trying to watch for a pattern like that. Unfortunately, those trends take time to monitor, but I'm sure Doc Chapman will be watching that very closely.
So I guess sort of my takeaway from what you just said is that some of these spikes may be artificial, and that, you know, it could be much more of a flatter curve than what the graph is depicting.
I think what's important to look at is the number of positives compared to the positivity rate on that date. So, if we have what we saw, the direct relationship before when we had a little bit of a lower positivity rate, is if you run 1,000 tests that date, you're going to have more positives. So if you get target locked on only the number of positives, then it's going to tell a different story than the positivity rate and total number of tests combined.
One good thing that is really noticeable in these graphs is the significant drop in the death rate. So that's wonderful news.
Yes, ma'am. We've been happy to see that, and there has been some debate. I have heard some mention even by one of the doctors at Sacred Heart Ascension Pensacola when the governor was out there giving his press conference, that a particular doctor thought that there were different strains that were available in the country, and they weren't sure which one we were experiencing here and whether or not that strain had, as it began to replicate with time, perhaps lose some efficacy. And I think they're going to be watching for that closely. I think there needs to be, and just like the doctor said, there needs to be some more science behind that, but they are looking at that as perhaps one of the reasons, combined with hitting the lower age demographic and the fact that there's already robust PPE available, and the hospitals have already ramped up their policies. They have their ability to convert airborne isolation rooms and have medical surge beds available, that the hospital, although it may have elevated numbers, is in a very good position to handle that surge at this time.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've noticed, because I've been watching your numbers really, really close, there's been a slight, for a long time we had, the hospitalization was really steady between 6 and 9 people for a long time. And I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 days a slow increase in ICU beds being taken up by COVID. But then I also noticed our long-term care numbers went up at the same time. Is that pretty much directly related? Because earlier, younger people were getting sick, and now we have this uptick in our long-term extended care facilities.
And one of the data points I don't get to see is whether it is a person that was from a long-term care facility, is a person in an ICU bed. I don't have that level of, I can't put a name in that bed, in other words, with my level of access to ACA. What I can say is that there is absolutely a difference in the number of people occupying the medical beds and the ICU beds now. It is increased, and one of the things we are concerned with is whether or not that increase in the long-term care facilities will be serious enough to hospitalize. Many of them, even though you have a case in a long-term care facility, may not require hospitalization, or it may require transfer to another area that can go ahead and handle them. So whether or not those all translate to actual beds and bodies, that's not always a one-for-one ratio. Yes, sir.
Is there anyone, Skip?
Yeah.
Mr. Morgan,
May
go
I-
ahead. Mr. Morgan.
So one kind of, I guess one of the frustrations I have with our testing is, we're now at a 7 to 10 day turnaround from the DOH testing, 5 to 7 on a good day, 7 to 10 now. And it's really hard, as a business owner, and we're lucky no employees have gotten sick yet and been tested positive, but we have had scares where we've had employees who are symptomatic and they go and get tested, and 8 to 9 days later we get the results, and so you inform if they had tested positive, the good news or the bad news is you worked with somebody that had, tested positive to COVID-19. The good news is it's been 9 or 10 days, so it's hard for us to make informed decisions with such a long turnaround on test results. So is the county doing anything to address that, to try to get faster results, quicker tests?
That has nothing to do with the county at all. It has to do with the lab that processes it. So the different tests that come now are actually assigned a lab. And that lab that processes it, with the amount of expanded testing, if you look at just the numbers in Okaloosa County alone, that we went up to 16,000 tests now, whereas 2 months ago we were in the 5,000 and 6,000 range. Multiply that by 67 counties and the labs available to test those kits. So that's not anything that the county has control over. Those are private labs. that are processing some of those. So that's not anything we have influence over. What we are looking forward to is, some of the state-run sites have the rapid testing, but there were questions early on as to the accuracy of the rapid tests. And of course, the availability of the rapid test is nowhere near the availability of the PCR test now. So if we were to wait for something like that, we would cripple our testing system at the moment.
Sure. Yeah, it's hard to make decisions when you're waiting 7 to 10 days for results.
We're in the same boat, sir, in the county. When we have folks, let's say if we have somebody in Public Works that tests positive and that person was in a building with 11 other people, we're going through the exact same thing. I feel your pain on that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for coming tonight.
My pleasure, sir.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Braden.
I have one more. Is it possible to get a results from city by city instead of just countywide?
The city-by-city data is in there, and I can get down there, but we're not going to be able to put it on a one-page graph, which is what we've been asked to do for efficacy and for people to be able to glance at it on their phones. But something I caution you on is we are not in a lockdown state, and if you become target locked on where the person's address is, the fact that we're a mobile county will lead people into a false sense of security. So if you have somebody, let's say City X has 3 people listed there, and people say, City X is great, I'm going there and I'm not going to wear my mask because there's no COVID there. Well, City X has 3 people that listed City X as their address when they went for treatment for COVID and got tested positive. That doesn't mean there's 3 cases in City X. So that's where the people listed their address on their positive tests. So with as mobile as we are, let's say Destin only had 10 people positive here. How many people were in Destin last weekend? Or the weekend before that? How many of them came from Mary Esther? How many of them came from Crestview? How many of them came from Alabama? You know what I mean? So when we look at that, the data is there, but it's only where the people listed their residence, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Anyone else? If not, thank you so much for everything you do, and I wait every afternoon for your report. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. We swapped our agenda around, so now we can, after having these this report, we'll open it up for the public comment. This is public comment on agenda items that are not public hearings, and we do have quite a few public hearings tonight, so just refrain from discussing anything that are on those public hearings. You can discuss about things that are on the agenda that aren't public hearings, and things that aren't, that you just are concerns of yours and you'd like to talk about. When you come up, we ask you to just state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes to share your concerns with the council. And at this time, I'll open it up. First up, Marcy, come on up. I don't see anybody trying to elbow you out of the way, so you're first. I'm allowed to talk about 4th of July? I don't think that's on the agenda, ma'am.
On the agenda, I wasn't sure. Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. So just a couple of things. One time when I was over at the park with, actually Councilman Marler was there, I noticed that across the street that the water runoff that comes through, you guys have a certain term for it, but it's right across the street. It's all covered up in brush and probably needs to be cleaned out. So there's a clean drainage out to the outfall, maybe? Yes, help me out. There's a drain there. It has a, yeah, it's just right across the street from the park where they want to put the fire station. There's a metal bar. And
on Calhoun, right, is where you're talking about?
Yes, it's on Calhoun.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was what I was trying to say, and I couldn't think of it back there. Yes. So I just wanted to mention it in case someone hadn't seen it. But back to July 4th. So in my personal opinion, from what I was witness to this weekend, it seems that Memorial Day was much busier than July 4th. Now, I think that July 4th, probably because it was a changeover day and maybe because the COVID numbers are up, maybe that's why people weren't here. But I did want to note that. That's not that there wasn't traffic. But I just wanted to mention that. We have an issue with driving on the beach at Destin Point. Just today, we had a car that was stuck there in the emergency lane. They decided they were going to drive out there. They found out that they couldn't. It was blocked for about an hour. My biggest concern was, well, of course, I don't want anything on the beach when there's turtles and nesting birds, but more importantly, if an emergency vehicle needed to get out there during the day, they would not be able to get out there. Well, I guess they could if they drove over the dunes. I also wanted to mention, I believe Destin has a short-term rental management problem. If you didn't see my blog, there was a 2-bedroom house unit across the street from me. It's the same size as the townhome that I live in, 1,260 square feet. I counted 17 heads going in there, and I'm not talking about walking in. I'm talking about checking in with all of their baggage and luggage. 9 children that were elementary age, 7 adults. That's 3 adult parents and 1 grandmother and 1 infant child. What's the most important part about this is that I contacted the owner. I didn't contact anyone else, and I said, you have a problem. She made a call to her short-term rental management company. They didn't return her call for 13 hours. She called them at 8 or 8:30 p.m. on Friday night. She received a return call from them at 9 a.m. on Saturday. At that time, there was no sign up, so had there been an emergency, no one else would know who to call. You didn't even know who the property management company was. I happen to know because I live there. But my point being is, I've participated in the short-term rental task force. I attended the first one. I've been to every single meeting for the past 2 task force. It's a management problem. I can't blame an owner who's an out-of-town owner who has no idea and is trying to do the right thing. So I just wanted to mention that because I think it's really important that the city knows what's going on out there. I have other things I'll talk about, but I'll do that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. And I'm sure you know how to get a hold of Joey in situations like that.
Well, I didn't want to report it because I spoke to the owner.
Okay. Thank you. Up next, anyone in the audience would like to step up, make a comment? Seeing none, do we have anybody queued up online?
No hands are raised at this time.
All right, no hands are raised. How about you, Ray? None? Well, at this moment, at this portion of the meeting, I'll close public comment, and I want to remind everyone that online and here that there'll be another opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comment. So we will move on to item number 4A, the city manager's report. Take it away, Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Item 4A is the staff is asking for council's authorization to execute the attached contract for miscellaneous fire safety equipment with B&C Fire Safety Incorporated. And Mr. Burgess is here should you have any additional questions regarding this.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion if you'd like.
Go ahead,
I move
sir.
that the city manager be authorized to terminate the miscellaneous alarm fire safety contract with Advanced Protective Technologies and execute the attached contract for miscellaneous fire safety equipment with B&C Fire Safety, Inc., and issue a notice to proceed.
I have a motion and I have a second. Comments? Seeing none, we'll just start. Mr. Braden? Yes. Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marler? Yes. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Hey, Ray, can you put our council members back up on the screen? I miss them. There we are. Hey, guys. All right. Item B.
Item 4B is staff is asking for council's authorization to execute the attached contract for fire and security monitoring with B&C Fire Safety Incorporated. And Mr. Burgess, again, can answer questions if there are any.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I got a second. Is there any further discussions or question for Mr. Burgess? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call vote. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marler? Yes. Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Braden? Unanimous, so moved. Go ahead, sir.
Item 4C is staff is requesting some direction from council regarding the Noriega Point embayments workshop held a week ago. Staff is just wanting to know what the wishes of council are as far as bringing back a draft resolution or a resolution at the next or a future council member crafted by the attorneys. There is a potential suggested motion, or we can go with one that y'all would like to go with instead, or neither.
Well, let's entertain a motion, and then we can have this discussion. Somebody want to entertain a motion?
I'll make that motion if you like. I believe that this is what we discussed at the workshop. So I move that the city attorney draft a resolution allowing for recreational watercraft in the northernmost embayment close to the tip of Noriega Point and present it for consideration at the next council meeting.
I have a motion,
Second.
and I have a second. Any discussion per our workshop? Ms. Ramswell, and then Mr. Braden, I'll get you next. I saw Ray. Go ahead, Ms. Ramswell.
So I just want to reiterate that I oppose opening any of these embayments to water motorized vehicles. I have multiple concerns about doing something that the public was not aware of. I have multiple safety concerns and multiple maintenance and structural integrity concerns. So I'm just voicing my absolute displeasure with this turn of events. So,
Thank you, Ms. Braden.
Thanks. I missed that workshop. Was there any talk of, or can we do non-motorized vessels in that embayment? Bueller?
Well, I was there. I don't think we discussed the nuance of whether or not vessels were going to be restricted based on whether or not they had props and motors. But this is as good of a time to discuss the concept, I suppose, as any.
Maybe we were asked to allow boats in one of the embayments, I guess, but they don't have to be necessarily motorized, huh?
Well, and I don't think we ever got that. That was a level of detail with the idea of the vessels being allowed that I don't believe was discussed in the discussion with DEP. So I don't know if they would be against or amenable to that level of a conditional restriction. I don't know.
Or maybe the use of a motor would be prohibited within inside of the embayment?
Well, at this point, I think perhaps the best way to do it is rather than just pass a resolution if it was, I have no objections to restricting it to just non-motorized vessels. I don't know what DEP's issue is, so my suggestion is why don't we ask them specifically, at which point they can tell us up or down, at which point then we can decide whether or not we want to move forward with the resolution. In that regard, I might offer that you throw a substitute motion out there to direct staff to contact DEP on that specific issue and see what they say.
I have a substitute motion. Do I have a second?
Well, I was offering it for
I'll make
Rodney
that.
since it was his.
Yeah, I'll make a substitute motion.
Go ahead.
Direct staff to contact DEP and see if we can allow non-motorized vessels in that one embayment.
Okay, I have a motion.
I'll second that, Mayor.
We got a second? All right,
Mr. Mayor?
go ahead.
Okay, so are we saying only non-motorized watercraft in that embayment, or are we saying, what exactly are we saying?
Staff is going to find out if that is allowed or not, if that's good enough for DEP or not.
Yeah, because I think
We're going to ask them if they will allow us to allow watercraft, but only non-motorized watercraft.
Correct.
it's just to ask them a reasonable question. I think the compromise was just boats and swimmers in that one, and no boats in the other three was a compromise that our staff and Mr. Destin had come up with, but it's not going to hurt for us to ask them, will they fudge a little bit more, just don't do kayaks only. I don't think there's any harm or to ask that. Ms. Ramsell, go ahead.
So just a couple thoughts here, and the first thing is why, I know we want to be neighborly and good partners and et cetera, but why are we reaching out for permission when we are responsible for the maintenance and the management of the point? We should be making the decisions and submitting it and saying, this is what we've decided. I hate operating out of a sense of fear. There's not been a threat made to us, so worrying about losing something that has not even been a threat, that's not how I operate. But the other thing to consider here is the fact that if we're asking to allow, I'm not in favor of any of them, I'd prefer non-motorized, but if we are saying it's okay to allow non-motorized vessels in that area, think about the area we're talking about. We're talking about the tip. Where are they going to go? Are they going to cross the busy channel with all the boats and motorized things there and put them right in the middle of harm's way? How many people do you know, actually tourists, follow the no-wake zone? So that to me is a concern. You know, let's have people on a kayak and a paddleboard all pull up to the top embayment and then try to make it over to Crab Island. So I see that as another concern. So I'll stop there.
So, Ms. Ramswell, the reason that we're trying to make these concessions is our authority over over Noriega Point and these improvements is by no means absolute. They're paying for all of the improvements, and they still have a couple $1 million more of improvements to hand over. Furthermore, when they finally execute the title commitment and the management contract that will give us our authority over that area long term, it's not exclusive, and it's going to be ultimately with some still residual strings attached. And that's the thing is, we don't have complete autonomy over that point, and we will never have complete autonomy over that point because they have sunk so much money in previously this council in order, because it's not fee simple owned by the city. It never has been. We're kind of the managers of it because the Board of County Commissioners and us have gotten into a historic arrangement to be able to administer Noriega Point, but now we have a third party, which is the DEP, that is exerting some influence and control over the area because they came with the bag of money, and that was a part of it. And while I do not agree with the conceptual idea that we really need to be mixing boats and people, I'm at a loss of how to completely get 100% of what we want, which is complete and control autonomy over there, and to restrict those areas exclusively to only swimmers when the grants package and application basically bound us to mix perhaps both. And now DEP is asking for that, and the best solution, the most reasonable solution I can cobble that will keep our relationship with the DEP sound and preserve the most embayments for the use and enjoyment for swimmers is to go with this compromise. And I think in this moment, it's still reasonable and prudent to see if we can keep motorized vessels out of the northernmost embayment that we intend to keep open to vessels, and that should allay a good portion of your concerns with regards to destabilization, prop dredging, and a certain amount of public safety hazards because you won't have motorized props. And at this point, we'll see what they say.
I see your point. To me, I feel we have abided by every single condition in the agreement, in the plan, in the application, in the MO, I mean, everything. So, yeah, okay, I'll stop.
Let's just go ahead and take this to a vote because it's a simple ask, and we'll get a simple answer. Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, I have something to say. Thank you. Something that staff needs to make sure they remind the state about is that we have 600 feet of land on the harbor side that boats dock on. That's important to drive that point home and should not be forgotten, number one. Rodney, you beat me to it because I was going to make the same motion, but I appreciate you doing that. The other thing is, just out of curiosity, did staff bring this back on the agenda, or was this asked for by a council member?
Staff brought this back.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar? Yes. Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
No.
Mr. Braden? Yes. Ayes have it. So moved. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, sir. A couple quick announcements. The Okaloosa Board of County Commissioners are scheduled to consider funding for beach acquisitions in Destin during their meeting tomorrow. So hopefully, we will hopefully hear some good news out of that.
Council, real quick on that, I'll be at that meeting to represent the city.
Also, we're tentatively scheduled to complete the closing process for Captain Leonard Destin Park on July the 20th. So we may have a new park by the end of the month.
Mayor, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Kyle, why are you going and not Kim?
I'm going to the county meeting. I'm one of the people with the most knowledge. Parker was going to go, but we had some, we had a miscommunication with the county, and we're going to present a more thorough presentation to them, hopefully in the coming meetings. But until then, they were asking that somebody from the city be there to address any questions they may have.
Yeah, and I was going to personally go tomorrow morning, but I've got a conflict with some stuff I'm doing in Pensacola, but we figured we'd send him just in our stead. But I'm going to give a thorough presentation of everything on the 21st or 27th?
21st.
And honestly, if any of you guys want to go, it's up in Crestview. That's the only thing, and it starts at 8:30, but anybody's welcome to go.
I thought Lance had said it was about land.
It involves the beach acquisition project.
It's our,
That's buying lands. I don't know why Kim wasn't involved with that.
Well, if you both want to go, I suppose that's fine.
Mayor,
go ahead, sir.
I have a question. Is our deputy city manager going to take part in that? Because Webb has been very involved in this and is extremely knowledgeable. Is he taking part in this as well?
Webb?
We have been in discussions with the county. I mean, I can go tomorrow and attend with Kyle and Kim if that's the wish of the council.
No,
but
if you don't think that's...
I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell. Yes, I have most definitely been involved in this process.
Thank you.
Kim, would you like to, you look like twice you grabbed your microphone.
I'm just wondering if there's questions I need to answer. I have not been involved in the process until maybe the past couple of days. I joined in with Kyle and Webb, but they've been working on it with the county for a while. We had a conference call today with them where the date was pushed back, where Councilmember Destin was going to do the presentation. That'll be the 21st. Kyle was merely going to go tomorrow to answer the question of, is this amount of money something that the city agrees to, I believe, and he was simply going to agree and say yes, and then the larger presentation that I think more of us would attend would be on the 21st.
So when we get down to the brass tacks and actually purchasing land, are you going to be involved in that process?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
This is just a discussion on the funding for it coming from them.
It's really preliminary. They're looking at their capital budget in general, so it's not specific to the city. On the 21st, we'll have a lot more to say.
Any other questions, comments? All right.
That's all I have, sir.
All right, Kyle. It's your time. We'll take a break about halfway through these public hearings.
I appreciate that.
We'll go to 7:30 before we take a break. Just give everybody a heads up. Somewhere around 7:30. Go ahead.
All right, we have the second reading of ordinance number 20-19-CC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to construction noise, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for the amendment of Article 2, noise of Chapter 14, offenses and miscellaneous provisions of the Code of Ordinances, providing for incorporation into the Code of Ordinances, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
And seeing how this is a public hearing, at this time I'll open up the public comment part of this hearing. Does anybody like to step up and make a comment about the second reading of this ordinance? You have anybody queued, raising their hand electronically? Go ahead.
Eileen, we're going to go ahead and unmute your microphone if you would like to comment on this.
You're a little garbled, Eileen. Unfortunately, we cannot hear anything but a bunch of interference. Eileen, it's on your end. Maybe if you could try it again. Unfortunately, ma'am, we can't. The audio is ineligible. We can't hear what you're trying to say. I recommend maybe if you could email Ray your comments, and of course, I don't know. If you have headphones with a microphone, that would help, but your computer microphone is not working properly.
Can't they call into the phone as well?
Give us a number and I'll put it out there. Yes, could you give us a number?
There is a phone number that you can call in with. That phone number is 415-655-0052.
All right, what we're going to do is give you an opportunity to call in by phone. The number is 415-655-0052. I'll give you a moment to make that phone call if necessary. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment on this particular item? Did you have anyone? No? Ray, no comments? Well, this is just one of the unfortunate aspects of trying to hold public meetings online. Just sometimes technology fails us, so I don't know what else to do but press on with this ordinance at this time. I'll entertain a motion, and then after we have the discussion, right before the vote, we'll see if she has an opportunity to call in. Go ahead. Anyone?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, ma'am.
I move that the City Council adopt proposed ordinance 20-19-CC on second reading.
I have a motion.
I'll second it, Mayor.
And I got a second. Any further discussion on this ordinance?
This is the direct result of the problem at Twin Lakes, I believe.
Yes.
It first came about when we had some noise complaint over at Vintage Destin, actually, I believe the new apartments behind Winn-Dixie. But it would apply citywide.
All right. Well, unfortunately, the phone call didn't work either. So we're just going to go ahead and take a vote if you're all ready. Any further comments from any of our council members? Seeing none, Mr. Braden? Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Ayes have it, unanimous, so moved. Go ahead, sir.
We have the second reading of ordinance number 20-09-PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcel described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from residential, office, institutional, recreation, and institutional to institutional, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Comprehensive Plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. It's a public hearing, and at this point, I'll open this up for public comment. Is there anyone in the room that'd like to discuss on this ordinance? Ms. Bell.
Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. I was online today trying to pull up the whole entire agenda packet. So when you guys are discussing these changes in the maps, can you please just verbally let us know out in the public what we're talking about? Because I wasn't able to pull up the whole packet. Yeah, so we can have an idea of where you're talking about these changes are, just so we can, well, but I'm only allowed to talk to him.
No, we'll Kim will probably give a description in just a second.
I'm just asking for more information, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments from the public in the room? Anyone online? Okay, seeing none. Ray? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion at this time. I'm going to close the public hearing portion.
So this one is over by Mattie Kelly. It's the property surrounding Mattie Kelly where their outdoor amphitheater and everything is.
All right. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make the
Mr. Mayor, I'll
motion.
make that motion if you like.
Or you can go ahead.
I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 20-10 PC, city parking lots. I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 20-10.
Wrong one, Skip. We're on the second reading of 2009. He said 2010. 2009, Skip.
Okay. Okay. I move the City Council adopt proposed ordinance 20-09 PC, Mattie Kelly Arts Foundation. I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 20-09 PC, Mattie Kelly Arts Foundation, to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for adoption of the future land use amendment.
I got a motion. You got a second? Any further discussion on this ordinance? Seeing nobody raising their hand on screen and here in the room, Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Braden. Ayes have it, unanimous, so moved. Sir.
We have the second reading of ordinance 2010 PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcels described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from North Harbor mixed use and residential, office, institutional to institutional, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Comprehensive Plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
Kim, would you like to give a general description just for the audience?
This is the city lot that's next to the community center only, and it is matching up the future land use map with the rezonings that were done, so it's a cleanup item.
Thank you very much. Seeing how this is a public hearing, I'll open up this portion of the meeting for public comment on ordinance 20-10-PC. Is there anyone that wants to make a comment? How about you? Online? No? Ray? No further public comment? I'll go ahead and entertain a motion. Council, please.
I'll make the motion. I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 20-10-PC, city parking lots. I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 20-10-PC, city parking lots, to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for adoption of the future land use amendment.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mayor.
And I got a second. Is there any further comments from any council members on this ordinance? Seeing none, Mr. Braden? Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar? Yes. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved. Sir.
With the second reading of ordinance number 20-11-PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcel described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from medium-density residential and residential office institutional to residential office institutional, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Comprehensive Plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Kim, would you give us a general description for the audience?
Sure. This is Sugarloaf Apartments off of Airport Road next to Kellair, and this is another cleanup item to make the future land use map match the zoning for the rezoning you recently did.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to make a public comment, seeing how this is a public hearing? Seeing no one in the audience, do you have anybody queued up?
No, sir.
All right, Ray, any emails? Seeing none, I'll close that portion, the public comment portion of the hearing, and I'll entertain a motion from the council.
I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 20-11-PC, Sugarloaf Apartments. I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 20-11-PC, Sugarloaf Apartments, to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for adoption of the future land use amendment.
I have a motion.
Second.
And I have a second. Is there any further discussion by anyone? Seeing none at this time, Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Braden? Vote is unanimous, so moved. Sir.
I have the second reading of ordinance number 20-12-PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcel described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from Bay Estates to recreation, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Comprehensive Plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is also a public hearing.
Ms. Kopp, could you give us a general description, please?
Sure. This is the old CEMEX plant site near Joe's Bayou boat ramp.
Thank you very much. All right, this is a public hearing, and at this time, I'll open this up to anyone that would like to weigh in and make a comment publicly. We have a couple people, I think, that want to share their thoughts.
Hey, Sandy Trammell, 3823 Indian Trail. I understand what this is all about. My question is, are we changing this to make it a parking lot for boat trailers? Or are we eventually going to make the cement plant something that the public can use and put the boat trailers back on the other side of the road? Just a question.
Thank you, ma'am.
Under the, I can just answer from a legal perspective, not for your policy, but from a legal perspective, under this rezoning, any recreational use that's allowed in the recreational zoning and future land use categories would be allowed.
Thank you for the clarity.
Which would disallow parking of trailers, correct?
As a standalone use, but it could allow parking if it's part of a park.
Well, we have a grant in for the improvements to that entire area, and that's forthcoming. But in the meantime, we've been using it for that, just as, yeah, and I think that's where the policy position still remains, which is as soon as we can get our grant money and do the improvements, then that won't be a boat parking lot any longer. It'll be an enhanced waterfront park.
That's a discussion for another day. We just don't know yet. So we can't answer that, but your point's well taken, Ms. Trammell. Go ahead. Next.
Harburger, Spring Lane. Okay, so will we have are you saying there's no decisions made on exactly what that, do we have anything on that? Okay, so because the chaos that I saw, you might want to think about, and I know it was 4th of July, because they do park that and the whole line starts now, and I'm glad that she brought that up because it is temporary, and I wanted to see if we could get an update on the environmental study. Today? Okay. I'm sorry I had not had a chance. I was going to Okay.
Yeah, right now we're changing the designation from Bay Estates, which is the nice, large palatial residential zoning that it's been for a long time. Even I think the reason they had the C-Mix plant there was because it predates the city, and their use there was when we were part of the county. And while
They
we
were the
became
oldest grandfather
right,
status
and
in
when we
Destin.
became a city, that entire area became Bay Estates, even though that make them a non-conforming legal use. At which point, then we bought the property, and now if we want to be in compliance with our own zoning, we need to rezone it to recreational purposes so we can put in the park that we've all put in an application for and intend to build.
Okay, and I just wanted to echo Mrs. Trammell's remarks about a park and not a track. Thank you.
So noted. Thank you. Anyone else that would like to make a comment on this ordinance? Seeing none here in the room, do you have anyone online?
No, sir.
And Ray, any emails or messages? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this, and I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 20-12-PC, CEMEX plant. I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 20-12-PC, CEMEX plant, I can't say that, plant to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for adoption of the future land use amendment.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mayor.
Got a second? Is there any further discussion at this time?
I have one comment.
Did you have one, Mr. Morgan? No? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Marler.
I know you said that the other part would be addressed another day, but we are going to have to figure out where to park these trailers. So
Yeah,
it's going to have to come up.
Okay, like I said, that's for another day.
Okay.
Right now, we're just trying to get our zoning designation straight. So, any further comment? Nope. Mr. Braden? Yes. Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Obadier?
Yes.
Ms. Marler?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved. Sir?
We have the second reading of ordinance number 20-13-PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcel described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from institutional and town center mixed use to institutional, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Comprehensive Plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Kopp?
This is a future land use map amendment for the DUMC property. A portion of the property is still TCMU, and so the entire parcel is being changed to institutional.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone that has any comments from the room here, of the public? I'll open the public hearing portion of it. Seeing none, is there anyone queued up online?
No, sir.
None? Ray? Okay, thank you. All right, well, at this point, I'll close the public hearing portion, and I'll entertain a motion.
Oh, okay.
You've been designated tonight, Preble, so just
Well, it's
keep it
usually
handy.
Skip, so I guess I'll take my turn. I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 20-13-PC DUMC. I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 20-13-PC Destin UMC to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for adoption of the future land use amendment.
I'll second that.
Thank you, and I have a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Braden? Yes. Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved. Sir?
We have the first reading of ordinance number 20-21-CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending Article 7, General Provisions of the City Charter to create a new section prohibiting the vacation of waterfront right-of-way, providing for a referendum on the charter amendment, providing for a ballot question, providing for a vote at the November 3, 2020 general election on whether to prohibit the vacation of waterfront right-of-way in the City of Destin, providing for coordination with the Supervisor of Elections, providing for conflicts, providing severability, and providing for an effective date.
All right, this is a public hearing, and so I'm going to open up the public comment portion of this. Mr. Trammell?
Sandy Trammell, 3823 Indian Trail. Yes, I'm in favor of this.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Very eloquently stated, too, please. Ms. Bell.
Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. So in reference to this one and the ordinance coming after this one, I just want to thank the parties here for bringing a voice back to the people. I think it's important that we have the ability to choose things for our community that aren't always driven by politics. Yes, I would agree with you. So for that, I want to say thank you very much for myself and the other citizens.
Thank you, Marcy. Anyone else? Come on up, sir. You do. You got to state your name and your address for the public record.
Brian Otto, 3826 Indian Trail. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Right, could have saved us. Not your fault, but we all could have saved everyone a lot of time if we had this in place years ago.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else in the room would like to weigh in? Come on up.
Harbarger, Spring Lane again, and I too want to thank the council and everything for all of the progress that we've made in this, and I want to show my support for it as well, and thank you. It was a long time coming.
Thank you, ma'am. Do you have anybody queued up?
No, sir.
Right? Oh, okay, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this. And Ms. Ramswell, will you read this? You want to give the motion?
I tried to.
Well, come on.
Go ahead.
Prep needs a break.
Well, I've been trying to buzz in, but it hadn't worked. I move to approve ordinance 2021 CN.
I'll second it.
We got a motion to approve first reading of ordinance 2021 CN, and I got a second.
So I asked Ms. Kopp today because for me, it seems very strange that I'm totally in favor of this. I just want to put that out there. But the fact that we're putting it in the city charter seems really unusual to me. Typically, when we deal with land use issues, it would go in our comp plan or more specifically even the land development code. So I wanted to query the rationale for suddenly putting something like this in our charter, which doesn't deal with any of that at all.
I can answer that, Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
Basically, I have the personal belief, and I think the majority of the council would agree, that we should never vacate any waterfront right-of-way property, period. And the best way to enshrine that belief is to put it in our city charter, where the only way to revoke that prohibition of vacation of waterfront right-of-ways would be to have another charter amendment and have the voters approve it. And I think this issue that we just had recently, if this were in place, it would have saved the city, the residents, the city council, a lot of heartburn that we've experienced. And this is the best way to express the belief that I don't believe we should ever surrender any waterfront property ever.
And I have a question to this ordinance, seeing how it's the first reading. Is this a simple majority? Because it doesn't state that, the vote to enact this.
Are you talking about at the referendum?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. That'll be in the ordinance? Or it is?
That's in the statute. So
That's it.
Yes.
I think you're thinking of another future ordinance that we'll be discussing tonight that
Right.
requires more than that. But
That's
this
right.
one does not, so it will
That's why I
default
was,
back to the
that's why I was
statute.
asking the question.
Yep, you're right.
Okay, simple majority.
Majority.
Which is much easier to attain.
Well, and Ms. Abear brought up a good point, because it's here under this item and the next item, but specifically, it seems out of place to put a building height limit in the charter more so than the water issue. But I understand the point and I concur, but I just worry that if we start adding things like this into our charter, it's setting a precedence, and then the charter's suddenly going to get muddied with items that intentionally weren't intended for the charter, and they were to be in the LDC. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, and at some point, that could maybe create a legal challenge, because future councils may not want to be hamstrung like that in a land development and/or comprehensive plan situation. So, I mean, that's a valid concern. To me, I think this council is taking a different tact, and this council has every right to make it part of the charter, and then let the people vote on it. The people will, in the end, make the final decision on this. So that's the good thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, they would whether we had it here or in the LDC, right? Or in the code
Not really.
plan.
The council would have the control over the LDC. The citizens have the control over the charter. And I personally believe on big issues like development and like waterfront vacations of right-of-way, I think turning the power over to the people of this city is a good thing. You know,
Okay,
I think
perfect. That's the point that I was missing, that it had to be in the charter in order for it to go to a vote. So, perfect. That's what I needed to hear. Thank you.
Everybody good? We got a motion, we got a second? Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Oh, you did, hold on just a second. I'm sorry, Mr. Braden, go ahead. Your button didn't work.
Kim, I'm sorry, but is that a true statement that Chatham's talking about?
That the people would be voting for it? Yes. So if you vote yes on this ordinance tonight and on second reading, we would then forward the ballot language that's on page 2 of the ordinance to the supervisor of elections for inclusion on the November ballot. And then if a majority of the city's electorate voting at that election approves it, then it would be put into what would be put into our charter is the language also on page 2 of the ordinance that shows, that's underlined, that would be in our charter. So the ballot question summarizes it, and then the actual language would amend the charter.
And that's why it's in the charter and not our comp plan or LDC?
Well, yes, that would be why, because you're asking the public whether they approve of a charter amendment. And actually, I mean, we would certainly not be the only city to put some land development provisions into the charter. They don't all do it, but some of them do. For example, Cocoa Beach has a building heights in their charter. So.
Okay. Yeah, it's not that I didn't believe what Chatham was saying. I would just like to hear it from our attorney, you know, if that's the case or not. And another thing, it just seems like there's just a large, and it may be coming further down the line, but it just seems like there's a big loophole with this saying the right-of-way, waterfront right-of-way, because the property we just gave away was not actually waterfront right-of-way. It was in a right-of-way that led to the waterfront, but it was not waterfront. So, and I thought that was something that we addressed, and I don't know if it's something that we have to put a 500-foot, you know, can you address that?
That is at the discretion of council, but you're right. This specific language deals with right-of-way that shares any boundary with a water body. So if the right-of-way to be vacated does not share a boundary, it could still be vacated. So if you wanted to do something different, like a distance from a water body, we could still do that. There's time to make that change at the discretion of the council.
So with this, when this is written, this would not have, we would still been in the same boat we were in a couple months ago with the piece of property we gave away.
With the small section that was vacated, yes, but if it had been the entire portion, then no.
But then again, I don't think
Yeah, that's not the spirit of what I want to, I mean, partial vacations of any waterfront right of way. I wanted to avoid the issue we just had.
I think that we can leave the ballot language to still accomplish that, and I can just clarify further in that section that's on page 2, entitled 7.05, that says if any portion of the right-of-way, even the part not to, even if you're just vacating a portion, if any part of it touches the right-of-way, it will be prohibited. We can make that clarification, so that's a good point.
I just think we may have to put something in there, because you could say that, you know, Bayou Drive, you know, leads around to, you know, Harbor Lane or whatever, so you know what I'm saying? So that whole right-of-way actually led around to the waterfront, so where does it stop? And is it, you know, if we have a right-of-way for a piece of property is trying to be vacated within 500 feet or 1,000 feet of where that right-of-way dead ends into waterfront property?
I think I can just add the word portion, even in the ballot language, any portion of a public right-of-way, and that will cover it, and we'll clarify it in the charter as well. So we'll make those changes before second reading.
We'll need to, because we're just giving everybody false hope of what we're actually.
Well, not really, because they get to vote on it, so.
Yeah, but that's what you just said. If we pass this, the way it's written, that wouldn't have done anything with the property we just gave away. It still would have went through. And that's what we're trying to stop.
So can we rectify that now, or we rectify that in the second reading?
We will rectify it between now and second reading so that when it comes back, the language reflects what you want. But I think we can just do it by adding the word portion into the official ballot language, where it says, it would say, shall the City of Destin's charter be amended to prohibit the city from abandoning, giving up, or vacating any portion of a public right-of-way that shares any boundary with a water body? And then that will be covered, that loophole.
And it'll be in the next briefing material, so you can double check it. Sandy, we've already closed the public comment portion, but you can share your thoughts at the end on this, okay? Unfortunately. So do we want to take an up and down vote on this and then make a motion different than the one that was made?
You can just make, if everyone wants that change, you can just make the motion to reflect our discussion, so as amended.
Okay, so that would be a friendly.
Motion to approve the ordinance on first reading with the amendment before second reading to include.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell, would you like to amend that?
So noted.
So noted. Okay. Are you okay on the second? Okay. All right. So we've made a slight change to the motion. Is everybody clear on that, or do I need to have Ray reread that? Everybody clear?
Is that right, please?
Or maybe Kim Kopp, could you reread it then?
Motion?
Yes.
So
the new one.
So noted. I didn't write down the motion, but I believe it was to approve ordinance number 20-21-CN on first reading as amended.
Yep, I see some hit. Everybody's good with that. All right, let's go ahead and take this to a vote then. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ranswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved. And how many more we got? 2?
We can do it.
Okay.
I'll hold out.
Hurry up. All right. We're going to take a break after this second second hearing. Go ahead.
All right, we have the first reading of ordinance number 20-22-CN, ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending Article 7, General Provisions of the City Charter to create a new section entitled Building Height Limit, providing for a referendum on this charter amendment, providing for a ballot question, providing for a vote on the November 3, 2020 general election on whether to include the city charter, the city's maximum building height limit of 6 stories and require any application seeking to exceed that limit to obtain approval at a referendum election of at least 60% of the voters, praying for coordination with the supervisor of elections, praying for conflicts, severability, and an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
All right, so now this is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing portion of it. So anyone in the room would like to step up? Come on up. Go ahead, ma'am.
Trey Saber, 716 Main Street. I commend this council. I'm glad that they're going to put some more rights back in the hands of the public that get to vote on this, and I agreed with the beach, waterways as well. So thank you, council, for putting this forward.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
There. Sandy Trammell, 3823 Indian Trail. And yes, I do agree with ordinance 20-22-CN, and I concur with all the sentiments you've heard. Thank God the people are getting some information back and some rights back.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Next up, come on up. And it's on, so you don't have to hit it.
I know this is kind of a crazy question, Harburger, Spring Lane, but can we find out who writes the verbiage to these so people understand them? A lot of times they get a little twisted around. Do the supervisors of elections or do our land use attorney write the way that this will be presented during the election? We want to make sure, you know how sometimes these things get twisted and people really, and they're always calling and going, what does this mean? Can we make sure this is clear and that the people understand they're getting their voice back? They really need to be proactive. Who writes the verbiage on that?
We do, our land use. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Do you have anybody queued up?
No, sir.
Ray, any comments? None. At this moment, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of it. And Ms. Cobb.
If it's okay, I would just like to read the ballot language for the record so that you all can hear it and determine if you think it's clear, but...
Please do.
Okay, so the ballot language is entitled Amending the Charter to Provide Maximum Building Heights, and the question that would go to the voters is, shall the City of Destin's charter be amended to provide that no building height in the city shall exceed 6 stories, 75 feet, unless approved by at least 60% of the city voters at a general election? And then they would check yes for approval or no for rejection.
Pretty clear and concise. Everybody good with that?
So not to be complicated, but you know how we always hear, is that measured from the cornice of the road and to the crown of, or cornice of the building, the crown of the whatever. That's going to go into the LDC as it already is. But
don't
if
use the
someone
word
sees
cornice
this,
on a ballot.
well, that's what the point being, if people see this and it says 6 stories, 75 feet, well, is it 75 feet plus the corner?
So your answer is embedded in this. That is already in the comp plan, but the statute requires that we write the question very clearly, and it summarizes the language that will actually go into the charter, and it needs to be done in 75 words or less. So the actual language that goes in the charter that the ballot language is summarizing is on page 2 of the ordinance, and says 6-story, 75-foot building height limit. I can read that to you. It says, no structure, no part of any structure, and no attachment to any structure shall be erected at a height greater than 6 stories, 75 feet above the crown of the abutting road. Structures, if demolished, shall be replaced only by structures which conform to the height limits of this section. No owners of structures destroyed or substantially damaged by explosion, fire, flood, wind, erosion, or other disaster shall be denied the right either to rebuild or to demolish and rebuild to the same height as the building that was destroyed or substantially damaged in the same location. And then for purposes of this section, structure does not include water towers, flagpoles, air traffic control towers, and radio and other communication towers. So we're not going to put that into the ballot question. That's just a summary, but the details are in there.
Perfect, thank you.
You'd scare everybody. They wouldn't vote. All right, so we have a...
No, we don't.
To come to the mic for the record, sorry.
Yeah.
The people online can't hear you.
Not only that.
I'm sorry, I'm asking for clarification.
Go ahead, you can ask.
Just for clarification, 6 feet above the crown of the road? 6 stories? Okay, and what's the top of the crown of the road above? Is that 6 inches, 12 inches? What's? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So it's memorializing the limit that's already in the comp plan.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion. We have a second. Oh, no, we don't have a motion.
I'll make the motion, Mayor. I move to approve ordinance 20-22CN on first reading.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second. We kind of cheated and already had discussion, but is there any further discussion? Go
Yes.
ahead.
Okay, let me throw this one at you. I don't know how this works now, or we do it later on. So the voters vote, and they say no. They say roughly they're not happy, they don't want anything built over 6 stories or whatever. What does the developer, who does the developer sue under the Burt-Harris Act as with the property rights? I know that sounds funny, but if the voters vote no, or however...
They shouldn't sue anybody because they already have a 6-story height in the city.
But now, and that restricts future council from changing that also?
No, the future councils can always send something back to via referendum.
Okay.
All right. So we have a motion. We have a second. Go ahead, Steve. You got anything to add?
Yeah, just one other thing. I think when we get around to this, I think it would behoove us to advertise this on our social media and all to educate the public, because a lot of people aren't used to this. It may also motivate people to go out to the ballot box and vote. But I think we really need to push this information out to the public.
So noted. I think the city will be...
Yeah, to Mr. Michel's point, I believe under Florida statute, if this passes second reading, then we are within our rights as a legislative body to actually expend money to promote its passage. And we can have that discussion, I think, after second reading would be the appropriate time.
Correct. Yes. All right. Seeing no further discussion.
Actually, Mayor, I just wanted to say one thing. As the legislative sponsor of this, I wanted to thank my fellow council members for having an open mind. It has been a long time coming. I wish that we had passed this 20 years ago. You know, there's been a lot that I wish had not happened from a developmental standpoint within our community, but it is never too late to give the voice back to the people so that they can chart their own destiny. And I don't know if any of us necessarily will ever get the thank you that perhaps is due to some of these council members in this body, because this is somewhat rare in modern politics, where politicians remember that it's the people who are the ones that we have to represent, and it's their voice that needs to be heard in our democracy. And this is a fine example of us remembering that, and I appreciate having your support. I'm one of 7 members of this collegial body, and I thank you all.
Thanks, sir. All right. No further discussion. Mr. Braden? Yes. Mr. Amswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved. Last one.
Last one, indeed.
And then we're taking a break, everyone.
We have the first reading of ordinance number 20-23-LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending Article 8 of the Land Development Code, prohibiting the vacation of waterfront rights-of-ways, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
All right, at this point, I'll take public comments. Go ahead, Ms. Trammell.
Sandy Trammell, 3823 Indian Trail. I'm also in support of this, but I want to make sure that the verbiage on this reflects what we did for G. I don't know what it is right now. So.
This one actually already covers that issue, so yes, it does.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trammell. Next.
Brian Otto, 3826 Indian Trail. It's partial right-of-way, right? We have to put partial right-of-way in there.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Otto. Next, anyone? Seeing none? Anybody online?
No, sir.
Anybody email, text message? None? I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this, and I will entertain a motion at this time.
Okay.
Please hurry.
Okay, I move to approve ordinance 20-23 LC on first reading and direct staff to advertise for second reading.
Second.
All right, I got a motion, got a second. Is there any further comment on this, Mr. Braden?
Where does it say anything about a portion of right-of-way?
I will point it out. Under 80100D, it says, "No city right-of-way or any portion thereof may be vacated if any portion of the city's right-of-way shares a boundary with a water body."
Perfect, thank you so much.
Any other questions, guys, on screen? Seeing none? Ms. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ranswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar? Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved. We're going to take a 5-minute recess. Your seat, please. We'll go ahead and get this meeting started. So we got,
Now we moved them.
they moved everybody around. Steve's up on top. Mr. Overdeer's to the left. Mr. Morgan changed his lighting so we can see him a lot clearer. Before, he looked like a man in the shadows.
That was the point.
Only the shadow knows.
Only the shadow knows. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting back to order. And we are item 6, the consent agenda. Take it away, Lance.
Staff's available to answer any questions you may have on any of these items.
I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda at this time.
I'll make that motion, Mayor, for all of them, A through, I think it's H.
I got a motion to approve consent agenda items A through H. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and take a vote. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved. All right, item number 7, and I just want to remind after the comments from all our council members and our attorneys that there'll be public comment at the very end of the meeting. Mr. Braden, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. First one I want to discuss is the way our bid process is done. Lance, can you just give us kind of a rundown on how that's done, please, sir?
I'll do my best. Initially, we formed the bid document. It could be an RFB, an RFP, or an RFQ, depending on what type of acquisition we're looking for. Within that document, normally we would determine how the items would be scored if there was a scoring system on them. They would go out to bid, they would come back, they would be opened publicly by the clerk. The documents would be presented to the bid committee for the bid committee to evaluate and develop a recommendation to council based on the criteria within our purchasing manual and within the document itself. And then that recommendation would be brought forward to council for the final decision.
Okay, with this last bid we had for the Royal Melvin Heritage Park, it really wasn't a recommendation. You basically told us who was going to pick because of the scoring, the way it scored. The guy scored the most points, or the company scored the most points. So that's who was going to, we had no other choice but to pick him. But I found out the day after that we did have a choice, but that's neither here nor say. Okay, my next question is, and who is on this bid committee? I know Michael's on it. I know Lisa First's on it.
So, yes, the recreation director, Lisa, is on it. Mike is on it from Public Services. I'm echoing, I'm sorry. It's chaired right now by Jeff Kozad, our grants and projects manager. And Lewis from Community Development is a member, and Crystal is in an advisory capacity so that she can stay neutral and make sure that we are indeed abiding by our own purchasing requirements, as well as if it's state or federal money, the additional requirements from the state and federal agencies.
Okay. My next question is, and not to pick on Miss Lisa, but what qualifies her as to somebody that can recommend a contractor to build a multi-million-dollar project?
Well, in the case of the parks, I mean, she would be the park representative, especially on the bid committee. She would bring the perspective of someone who manages both parks and recreational programs that may take place in that facility. I understand your question. In the perfect world, which we don't live in because we're such a small organization, the bid committee would be composed primarily of engineer-type folks, and they would take it forward. We simply don't have that luxury, and so we need people to review it. They do their due diligence, and they put in extra time to do their homework on these because they're large documents, and they rate them to the best of their ability.
Okay. Mr. Michael Burgess, what phone calls did you make as far as background checks or anything on the contractor that you recommended for this project?
As far as checking references?
In any type of phone call, what did you do anything other than just look at the application the gentleman presented to you?
No, sir, I did not make any phone calls.
Okay. The first thing I did was pulled up the address on that document, his letterhead. And the address comes back to a bed and breakfast in Fort Walton on Okaloosa Sound. So that was the first thing come out. I was like, well, why are y'all recommending a contractor that's running out of a bed and breakfast to do a multi-million-dollar project for the city of Destin? I guess what I'm getting at is, we have people on the bid committee, that's not qualified, and I guess because we do get bids back that you do make a recommendation, and we don't have to pick the lowest bidder, as far as I understand, unless if it's our money we're spending, or maybe if it's a grant money we're spending, we have different guidelines. We have to go with the lowest bidder, or if he's qualified and meets all the criteria that you come up with, and he's the lowest price, and that's who we have to go with. But it's just fascinating to me that nobody makes any phone calls, nobody does nothing. I mean, I can put together a hell of a bid packet for you if you want for a multi-million-dollar project, and go around and take pictures of all the stuff I've done, or stuff that I haven't done, and look amazing. But nobody does anything. They just take what's given to them, and it was crazy to me that when I first was elected, I went to the bid committee, and basically David Campbell, the engineer, was running out. They all looked at him for guidance on, what do we do? Who you recommend? He was the one picking the contractors. So I think we need to come up with something else. I think the council needs to have a little more input with it, because we get the phone calls. It's, they're not calling you, they're calling me, and they're calling this council because we're the ones that hired them. We're the ones that picked them because y'all told us, look, we looked these people over and they're good, but how can you pick a contractor that his address comes back to a bed and breakfast in Fort Walton? That's embarrassing. A guy don't even have an office? I just don't get it at all. So, it seems like we're going to have a bid committee, and it just seems like a lot of the committees we have is irrelevant. It's, it's like the LPA. Is it because we have to send stuff to the LPA because they can either vote something down or not approve it or make no recommendation, and y'all bring it to the council, and the council, we do what we want it to. So I don't know if it's just something that we just have to go through or whatever, but I don't know. I'd like to hear from the rest of the council if they'd like to have a say-so in, who's picked, or because trust me, I don't go with y'all send me. When we get our agenda packet, I make some phone calls, and I do my own background checks and do my own research and whatnot. I don't have to do it near as much now because the staff's changed over. But it was horrible before. I had to dig and find out what the real truth was, what's really behind this. So it's I don't know what the answer is. To me, it's really embarrassing what we've gotten and how we're doing it.
So I'm not going to make comments about the specific Royal Melvin issue because I don't want to trigger any delays with any sort of legal consequences from bid protests or anything else. However, I hear your sentiment, and to that degree, is it possible that we could task our attorneys to come up with a bid process that includes a council member or members, or even a process that is augmented but still stays within statute without triggering some sort of, I don't want to, we're going to have to create a system that is more transparent, more accountable, but also doesn't trigger consequences from a contractual standpoint, just gumming up the system from bid protests. But I do agree that perhaps having an elected official from an oversight, maybe even just one of us, if we can select one to be the official person who goes with the bid process at the staff level before it comes back to the general council approval process, there may be room for us to bring more accountability and oversight to the bid process. And my suggestion is perhaps giving the attorneys an opportunity to take a stab at perhaps rearranging the bid process so that we can allay some of your concerns and bring more accountability to the process.
I mean, that's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking to do anything with the Royal Melvin Heritage Park bid at all. What is done is done. But yeah, there needs to be some other protocols or something else put in place that, you know, we just don't take what they send to us. I mean, when I got it, that's the first thing I did was went and pulled in the guys. I want to go see where he worked out of. I want to see the buildings. It was actually buildings that he built. What kind of money does he go through in a year's time? As far as building, I learned more about him, going on my own than what he submitted. So, I mean, there just needs to be a process outside. There need to be some phone calls made. There need, go visit some sites, call some references, go to the county, I mean, you can go pull his building file and see what buildings he's built, his permits. Don't just go with what he put on paper. Go into, when we're talking multi-million-dollar project.
And I think, I hear your concerns. I only know how to make it better on a going forward basis, and we can't be the first city that's ever run into this issue. And there probably are better examples that we can model after. My suggestion would be to put a motion on the floor that basically instructs the attorneys to go do some research and bring it back so that within the next several months we can revamp our bid processes so that we stay, one, CFR compliant, but also from an internal standpoint, we feel as a council we've at least got our thumb from an accountability standpoint on the process before it ever finally just gets plopped in our lap up here just to give it a yes or a no. And to that end, this is your red wagon, so I'm not going to make that motion, but I'd offer that up as an idea to move it forward to make it better, because I do share some of your concerns.
All right, let's do that. Well, I'll make a motion to. You got some, Steve?
Yes, I do. When I can speak, I'd definitely like to add something.
Okay, I'll yield the floor.
I got Ms. Ramswell up, and then I'll put you up next, Steve. Does that sound good?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Ramswell.
So I agree completely, and I believe it was this last meeting when I had suggested to staff that we get a contractor or somebody with contracting experience on that committee, because they really know how to kind of read through like you do. I mean, you've got that background. In the past, and I know when you and I first got on council, there was a different composition of that committee. Didn't we have a contractor on it? And weren't there other members, like engineers and such?
There's a lot of staff that's no longer here.
Yeah, so I'm completely with you. I think we need to get someone that's an expert in the field. I like the items that you mentioned as developing as part of a process. Make background calls, pull the files, look at a few projects, just do some due diligence on it. I mean, maybe I'm not going to task you, I know you're super busy, but some sort of list like that we're going through and checking. I mean, is there not one now?
We are currently in the process of revamping that in the entire role of that committee. And I understand what you're saying, and staff will go along with whatever you recommend. This is your show, but I will say that we're a big ship for a little town, and it takes a while to turn a big ship. We just got Ms. Strickland on board. She has extensive experience in this exact thing, from teeny tiny projects to huge projects on the scale of utilities installations across a county. So I mean, she's well versed, and that's why we, instead of making her the chairperson, which in the past our chairperson was our finance director of that committee, we made her the advisor to make sure that all the members were abiding by the rules for that particular item. Because if it's our money, the city's money, there's one set of rules, but if it's federal money, then there's a more strict set of rules. And she knows those rules, and we're writing them down, and we're using best practices and getting those in place so the processes can be repeated, which I think is what y'all are asking for. And it's up to you, but if you will give us a little bit more time to turn this thing, I think we're going to bring back to you what you want.
Would there be a conflict with having a council member sit on it?
What's their expertise, though? The
Well,
question
I
was
would nominate
expertise.
Rodney, who is a contractor by trade, and like,
You know, it's like I said, I'm not the expert on it either, but it's my ask that's on the line when they're calling and saying, look, this park that y'all hired this contractor is total chaos. He just packed up and left. He's over his head. It's me and you and this council that they're calling. It's not the staff. And if they call the staff, they're going to say, well, the council hired them. They're the one that proved it. Call them. So, I mean, and it's not anything against the staff. It's if maybe, or who's on the committee, it's maybe if once you narrow it down to a contractor, then each person on that committee has a job to do. You go pull some files and check this. You go check this guy's financial stuff. You go, you know what I'm saying? You go check this. Let's dig in, because we're dealing with $1 million project or $2 million project. I'm not talking about a $10,000 project or $40,000 project. We want to look into it a little bit, but yeah, maybe everybody on the committee's got a task that they go beyond what somebody just submitted. I mean, it's a lot of money. I mean, you wouldn't hire a contractor out of the yellow pages to build you a house, for $500,000 and not know anything about the guy. So, you get the floor. I'd like to hear from Steve.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. Rodney, you opened up Pandora's box, so you gave me a go on this, if you would. I want to speak to you all about a much bigger problem than just the bid committee. But before I start, I want to make sure y'all are clear on one thing. This is no accusation, no indictment against our staff. In many cases, of what I'm about to talk about is things that these people have inherited. The people that we have working for us right now, the people that the city has, are all hardworking people. Our mission tempos may be too much for them to keep up with, but I just want to be clear that you all understand this is nothing about them. But I have observed this from the day I came on committees and whatnot, that this city has a systemic problem of basic government operations we fall short on time and time again. Things that other cities have, we may not have it at this point. You all, I know, are fed up with me talking about the sins of the past. But I'll give you an example of something as an affirmative example. At our budget workshop, Ms. Strickland talked about the capital improvement fund being grossly unfunded. My words, not hers. Okay, that's what I call a sin of the past. Until we correct that, which she did, and that's a positive thing. But when I talk about sins of the past, it's these things that we're deficient in. And as we continue to correct those things, that's how we move forward. That's why I keep pounding on sins of the past. You know, the sheriff's office is an accredited organization, and they have a checklist of basic things in law enforcement. Do we have arrest procedures? Do we have that? I submit to you that maybe we should go to the Florida League of Cities or the Florida City Managers Organization. There's got to be an overall blueprint, if you will, for cities, regardless how small we are, how big we are. I'll give y'all some other examples. And again, I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I'm trying to explain to you all how we fall short. And again, it's possibly because our staff just doesn't know. The city of Destin, like all government organizations, has what's called GETS Communications, Government Employees Telecommunication Service, and Wireless Priority Service. We're on that. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. How many council members right now know the phone number, the satellite telephone for the city of Destin? Does anybody know that?
No.
Does anybody know our emergency, our ESF point of contact at the command center if something gets based up? The point I'm trying to make here is that it's not our staff's fault, but it's basic government operations that most cities have. And we're deficient in some of those things, to include maybe the bid process. Again, I want to stress, this is not an indictment on our city manager or any of our staff. It's just things that maybe we don't have experience with. When I brought up about having the audits, again, that was a sin of the past, not trying to hurt anybody, but trying to move forward. And I go back and I'm going to repeat myself one more time, because it's such an affirmative thing. It's such a positive thing. Ms. Strickland talked about the capital improvements. That's a move in the right direction. That's fantastic. But when I keep talking about the sins of the past and everybody gets aggravated about it, that's the kind of thing we need to do to continue to move this city forward. So when it comes to the bid process, this is just one of those other areas where we fall short. Like Lance said, this is a big operation, and I contend that our mission tempo may be, and you'll hear a little bit more about this later on under my talk, I would personally say that the attorneys are possibly the wrong people to deal with this right now, by virtue of the fact they can't keep up with what they have now. So there's a lot of IOUs on the plate of our attorneys. So if they think they can take that on, that's fine, but I want to hear it from them. I think it needs to be done, but I don't know if they are the right persons for the job. That's it for now.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I'm just going to go ahead and make that motion that direct the attorneys to bring us back some recommendations on some bidding instructions or bidding packets or bidding procedures.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second?
Rodney?
Sir?
Rod, I would offer a friendly suggestion if you would put a date certain. Just don't leave it out there because you'll never get it back.
Is 30 days enough?
Sure.
Thank you. That to the motion.
It's fine with me.
Okay, got an amendment to the motion. Second's good with it. Any further discussion?
Mayor,
Go ahead.
I have a request from a citizen to comment on this issue.
Sure.
Can I read it? It's from Michelle Melanchon, 111 Gulf Winds. Regarding the current conversation regarding screening people that submits bids, the city needs a vetting process. There needs to be a person with experience such as engineer, as well as a person with research experience to vet the people that submit bids. Research the person's criminal background. Search civil suits, collect previously owned business names and addresses so research can also be done in other states. This would be some of my suggestions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate those comments. Let's just take it to a vote. Ms. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ranswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Ms. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I just want to clarify one thing, just to make sure you all understood. When I said you never get it back from attorneys, I don't mean that our attorneys aren't doing their job. On the contrary, I think their plate is so full. That's my point on this. Not that they're not going to get anything done, but they have so much going on and they have so many IOUs. That was my comment.
So noted. Thanks, Steve. All right.
All right, the second one is, and I talked to Kyle about this one because there's a lot going around, and I want to get the air cleared on it. The mayor's authorities. What does it say in our charter, the duties of the mayor? Can you read that for us, Kyle?
Yeah, sure, Rodney. It's primarily in section 3.07. Powers and duties of the mayor. The mayor shall be recognized as head of city government for all ceremonial purposes by the governor for purposes of military law, for service of process, execution of contracts, deeds and other documents, and shall perform such other duties and functions as may be designated by the city council. Further, the mayor shall A, attend and preside at all council meetings, B, make such reports as the council may require, C, present a state of the city message at a public meeting in February of each year, D, perform such other duties as are specified in this charter or may be required by the council. E, has the power to summon the posse to suppress civil disturbances and to keep law and order during times of emergencies. F, be permitted to participate in debate in council meetings but shall not make or second motions. G, at all times represent the adopted position of council. H, cast a deciding vote should any issue before the city council end in a tie vote.
So what did it say about always representing the city as a mayor?
At all times represent the adopted position of the council.
Because the question has come up with the mayor going to different meetings and speaking as a citizen, and then in the same breath start speaking as the mayor of Destin. That, to me, that's not representing the city as mayor at all times.
I'd say it's a gray area. I don't specifically, I don't think there's going to be any legal authority one way or the other on whether or not the mayor can act as a citizen and at times not act as the mayor.
So what does all times mean?
It could mean at all times that he is acting on the city's behalf, or all times of every facet of his life, I guess.
Is there any other statute or anything that you can look into as far as gives the mayor more role as a mayor, or is there anything that the Attorney General has looked into and made recommendations on?
I can certainly look. I have not at this point.
I guess I need to make that as a motion, or do you need the consensus of the council for you to be able to look into that?
Yeah, I'd prefer it in motion form.
Okay, I'll make that a motion, or put that in a formal motion for the attorneys to look in further to the statute and maybe any recommendations or opinions of the Attorney General.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any further comments?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I don't know how far Mr. Braden wants to go back, but when the city was first formed, the mayor basically had very little duties at all except shaking hands, kissing babies, cutting ribbons. And we had a chairman of the council that ran the meetings. I wasn't on council, but I went to a lot of those meetings back in the day. And it was also sad to see that the mayor did not even get to sit up on the dais with the rest of the council. The mayor had to take a seat in the audience just like everyone else and was called upon by the council. One of the reasons that we did this, that the charter was changed by the voters, was to give the mayor more power to do what we felt later on in the charter that we should do, which is the mayor represents the city. A wise former city attorney once told me, it says, and basically this goes for the entire country, when you're an elected official, it says you can go up there as a citizen and they will pretty much address you as whatever your office is, even if you're out of office. If you notice that even though we've had past presidents, they're still referred to as presidents or congressmen or whatever. The basic thing is that the mayor representing the city, or even us representing the city, the biggest problem is that we don't have our own personal voice at that time because we are elected officials. We have an opinion of our own, which we can try, but then, as Mr. Braden has probably found out, that some people are saying things that the mayor is trying to throw in his own opinion and not the opinion of the council. The hardest part is to discern when we're citizens and when we're council members. I've discovered that my own self in a lot of things that I believe in, and also including my employment and all the other things. I think the biggest thing is to decide, not necessarily that's council to decide what the mayor's role should be, but I think it should go back the same way that it did before, as a voter referendum, suggestions of what the mayor should do as far as how much he represents. I know that our current mayor has been a champion for the charter fleet for many, many years, going to Washington, to Tallahassee to try and get the best he could for our fishermen, and I think adding the title of mayor at the present time is a plus for some of the things that we do that we're trying to promote in this town. And I see no problem with them using the moniker mayor because he was elected by the public to do the public's bidding as our mayor, and I think that's the way it should go. I actually personally believe the mayor should have more authority than what we are or what he's given now, but I'll leave that for another day.
So I'll hop in. At some level, we know that from a legal standpoint, our charter designates the powers of the mayor and also sets out how the mayor is supposed to act. And I think the charter is pretty clear. He has to represent the council's adopted position, which up until we vote, each of us only have our personal opinions on any position, and the charter doesn't restrict our voice as council members after we adopt a position. But ultimately, whoever's in the majority, that's the adopted position of this collegial body. It does put the restriction on the mayor to take the adopted position, regardless, even if it's a split council 4-3. And yeah, I mean, I know that the mayor and I personally have had many times where we've traded jabs, and there have been many policy points where he and I have disagreed. I just want to make sure that we are trying to put on the best face that we possibly can as a council, a mayor, a city, that we are putting our best resources into leading together and making sure that if we need to have discussions about policy disagreements, that we're doing so in a straightforward way. And my position is, I get it, it's a gray area. And up until we adopt a position, then the mayor does get to have his own positions from a policy standpoint. But after that point, if he's no longer taking the position adopted by the majority of this council, then we can have that discussion. I will say, I understand Mr. Bauman's point, which is there may not be clear case law on exactly, well, frankly, our charter is unique. It was our charter, and we have amended it to include and expand the powers of the mayor. And there may not be any similar city charter within the state of Florida that has ever had to litigate a specific issue that is even remotely close from a factual or legal standpoint as to what we're trying to figure out right now. And so my concern is if we send him on this task, we will get in another couple weeks an answer that is law's unclear. Furthermore, the charter doesn't even provide what remedies are available in the event that a mayor was to violate portions of the charter. Now, there may be something that is clarified in the statute or in perhaps an AG opinion, which we might want to seek an Attorney General's opinion in that regard. But I may offer my own personal opinion and save the suspense that I think it's pretty murky and unclear. And to whatever extent I'm able, personally, I always am going to try to make sure that we put the best face forward of this city, that we don't have infighting from policy standpoints. If we have things that we need to discuss, well, then we discuss them straightforward. And I I think if we need to tell the mayor, hey, listen, this circumstance, we think you went a little too far, then we can say that. And I think, and rather than just drawing it out, but I respect every member of this council, and I think all of us can find common ground where sometimes we don't want to, because it's the best thing that's for the city and the citizens. So I'll leave it at that.
Any further comment? We have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Morgan?
No.
Mr. Destin?
No.
Mr. Marlar? No. Mr. Overdeer?
No.
Mr. Mitchell?
No.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Nays have it. So moved.
I would like to make a comment. We sort of went to the vote, but there have been times when there have been posts that have been posted after the fact that we've come to some decision that I've seen, others have seen, brought to our attention. And I think that is part of some of the concern. I know I've heard of it. Clearly, Rodney has, or he wouldn't have brought this forward.
Well, I tried to remain silent on this and let it play out. The thing that Rodney brought up took place prior to this council taking action on closing the beaches, the day before. When I spoke as a private citizen for the people in our community that make a living on charter boats and in restaurants and stuff like that, I knew the damage that closing the beaches would do to those businesses. This council had not taken an action on that specific subject at that time. After they did, the following
Mayor,
days,
that's just a guess, sir.
Oh, no,
From
no.
you, I said nothing about that.
Okay, well,
I don't even know what you're talking about.
But that was an example, if some people would want to use, is I spoke prior to a council. If there's been a time where I have violated the policies established by this council, I would like for someone to prove that, because I have always, since I've been mayor, followed whether it's 4-3 or unanimous, I've always followed the decisions from this council. So
The reason I brought it up, Mayor, is because a lot of citizens have asked, and if I had to guess, you've cost the citizens over $30,000 in legal fees from on the legal team defending you and things you've done that you shouldn't have done. So I'm just trying to keep us out of more legal fees, that's all.
If you're referencing my violation of the public records request was based on assumption and mistake by myself, the state hasn't done anything. I'll take my fine or findings, or if that's the case. But that lawsuit was part of was way beyond anything that I had done at the time, and I'll let our attorney speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd really rather not discuss a lawsuit, even one that we've settled on the dais. I'll, of course, talk to any of you guys individually whenever you want.
And to each of us, I will remind us that we are in a public trust, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that dysfunctions between each other, our personalities, our policy positions only reflect poorly on the body as a whole, and it keeps us distracted from doing the work of the public. And to whatever extent in the future that we believe that we have issues with any individual up here not following the black letter of the charter or any other provisions, then at that time we need to bring that forward so that we can have a discussion. But as far as this is going, I would implore everybody to put their swords away and let's get on with the business of the public.
So if there are issues that have occurred that are of a concern, I brought some things up, I'll say, to the attorneys, things that have been brought to my attention, things that we've been made aware of personally. But clearly, we want to try to not air everything publicly that we can discuss individually with our attorney and perhaps settle outside of the public eye to spare embarrassment and a further black eye. But there are clearly issues, and is this something that we do need to bring forward and discuss publicly? Because like I said, I mean, I've had multiple things brought to me. I've seen multiple things on my own. So, I mean, I really don't want to have some airing of public, animosity or concern, but I don't want to sit here either and act like there aren't concerning issues, because there are. I mean, we were in a lawsuit.
As far as the specific lawsuit, again, I just prefer not to discuss that on the dais. Of course, I'll talk to each of you individually anytime you guys want. If you're talking about just generally behavior, then that's your guys' discretion to talk about if you want.
I think we've all been in receipt of public information that has been sent to us with suggestions and concerns, and other people thinking of filing things, not even coming from us, coming from the public.
I have nothing further, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Ms. Ramswell.
Okay, so let's see. There were a couple things that I put on here, and actually, it looks like somebody added number 3 and 4, which is essentially the exact same thing I had on here as number 1 and 2. So I don't know if somebody added those intentionally with the intent of adding different information. I don't know who did it, but if it's something different than what I had on here, it's numbers 1 and 2, or I guess just number 2, let me know. But otherwise, 3 and 4 are redundant. The first thing I had on here was the art out of utility boxes, and I believe I first brought this up about a year ago. And this is just an example, and this was in New Orleans. What they've done, and this was a conversation that I actually started with Mr. Sandstead and with the Main Street Business Alliance, and they've started the art banners and such. So what they've done is they've gotten local artists to sort of adopt the different metal boxes around the city and decorate them any way they see fit. Well, I say that, but clearly there are guidelines of some sort. The idea being they become, instead of an eyesore, they become something that's beautiful and promotes art and the different talents of folks, maybe even children throughout the community. And so I wanted to bring this up again because I think, number one, it's a wonderful idea. It's a way to get community involvement. It's a way to beautify the community. But I also think we're kind of looking for something to, this whole sort of unifying thread and a way to continue building on the sense of community. And so I wanted to bring this forward as perhaps an initiative that we could look at undertaking. I'm not sure if that would be directly with Lewis or whether we'd want to reach out to Mr. Sandstead and the Main Street or whomever.
I think it's a fantastic idea. The one thing that we're going to bump into, I think legally, will be is New Orleans is an old city, and it provides most of the public utilities from a municipal standpoint to its citizens. So I believe they actually do own, in New Orleans, the city of, the utility boxes. Here in town, the utilities are actually, the boxes themselves are owned by private companies that we have the franchises with. So if we can get their permission to do this, I think it's fantastic. I mean, they'll put in restrictions on what kind of mediums you can use. I mean, they don't want you painting one of their utility boxes necessarily in flammable liquids, but I think there's enough, I think there's enough room for some sort of debate, because public art is one of the best ways to enhance
Yeah, absolutely.
neighborhoods.
I mean, we could even make some sort of competition. We could do it a rotating basis because, of course, the sun wreaks havoc on everything. So maybe annually or something, we turn it over and a new artist takes over. You don't even have to be an artist. I mean, seriously, we could have the first grade do one or something of that nature. Lance, who would be the person to coordinate this with? Would it be Lewis and then have him brainstorm partners, or would that be something the city would take on and handle itself?
I think Lewis would be a good starting point, maybe, and then form an advisory group of citizens to help with it, like Mr. Sandstead.
Great. So if I would like to make it so, as Picard would say, but do you need that in the form of a motion, or is general direction sufficient?
it looks like there's consensus.
Okay, good deal. The next thing I had up here was submerged land lease and looking at the status of the application and what sort of boundaries and surveys have we put in. And I had brought this up on May 4th, and I hadn't heard anything other than I got a letter from Ms. Firth asking me what the intent was. So that's the only thing I've heard since May 4th. So can someone fill me in on that status?
Okay, so right now we have the boundaries that we're asking for on the map, and we just received from Michael, Baskerville, Donovan. He's going to charge us $8,000 to $10,000 for a survey. So I guess we just need to. We got that today, the price on that, and just that'll finish off our application once we have that.
Okay, and I guess, Ms. Kopp, and I spoke to you about this briefly today, are you assisting with this? Because it would seem like the land use attorney would take the lead. I mean, Lisa, I'm sure you're wonderful and you've written 400 of these, but it would seem like the land use attorney would sort of oversee an application like this.
I got brought into it probably a week or two ago when council members started emailing with staff. So I'm now involved. They've sent me their first draft of the application to review, and we're waiting on the survey. And I would hope and anticipate that we're going to take the survey and the application to you at the next meeting, their next regular meeting. So I think it's July 20th. And at that time, we'll have you bless it before we forward it over to DEP and just make sure that the intent is correct. But we're waiting on the survey before we finalize it because it's an integral part of the whole process.
And so do they require their own survey, like a brand new survey with an application, or?
Yeah, we're going to need a current survey of the property.
Because I know we've got 100 surveys over there, especially with the Noriega project going on.
And we want to show the area that we intend for the submerged land lease to cover. So the way I've discussed it with staff at this point, based on my understanding from the council, and you all can correct me if this is not what you have in mind, but it's going about, we're going to try to go about 30 to 50 feet out from the most seaward edge of the embayments in order to try to create sort of a buffer for safety of swimmers and boaters in that area, especially swimmers.
Okay, perfect. Well, I was just curious because like I said, it's been 2 months and I hadn't heard a word. So thanks for updating me. I would have thought this actually would have been done quicker, but I understand there's a lot going on. So if you could please just keep me in the loop on what's happening. Yes, sir.
One item I wanted to bring up is the project for the $8,000 to $10,000 for the survey, I believe is what the number is going to come out to, give or take. And this is not a budgeted project. I understand I have authority under $15,000, but I would like to get council's permission because this is not a budgeted item for this current budget year. So if you want us to do this, that's no problem, but I would just like council to tell us to move forward, and there's some contingency funds we may be able to use. Or
so basically,
I'll make a motion for you to spend the money to get this survey.
you want to put a dollar amount on that, Steve, or just leave it at that?
The quoted price between $8,000 and $10,000 for the survey.
Okay, I got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I got a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's take a vote.
Do we need to make a budget amendments?
I think he said there may be
city
some
manager
discretionary money that can be,
I'll have to look at the budget. I might be able to do an internal transfer, but with your permission, we'll see.
now you see it, now you don't. I stole that from Ricky Bobby. There you go. Works with my credit card. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second, and we have assurance from our finance director that she has the skill, capabilities. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar? Yes. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Vote unanimous, City Manager, you have the green light.
Thank you.
So then, skipping the others because they're part of the other, moving to item 5 is the 2.88 acre parcel for sale at 796 Harbor Boulevard. And I don't see him now, but ironically, the realtor for that property is Stephen Tatum. So he said if we had any questions, we can reach out to him, but I see he's already left for the night. But you know, we have been talking in the mayor's initiative, and big goal was to get more waterfront properties. And I had come across this parcel as being for sale, and it's right there on the harbor. And apparently, Mr. Marlar informed us tonight that that is where the original lighthouse was for the city, when the pass used to come out right there. So the parcel is, I believe, what, 2.88? And what is the asking price, Webb? Could you kind of fill us in on what you looked at and what you discovered when you looked into the parcel?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ranswell. It is 2.88 acres. From memory, I want to say the asking price is somewhere just north of 2.5 million and somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million. As you can tell, there are some existing docks that are right there. And also part of the land is a little bit constricted by the canal there, but it is a beautiful piece. It is right near Main Street and Beach Drive, and certainly a beautiful piece on our harbor.
Yeah, I think that would make for a beautiful little harborside park that could just be really done up really well. Boat launch, kayak launch, paddling. It could fit in with our whole idea of connecting to the different, you know, kayak launch trail thing that we've got going on at Heritage Park, and then down at the Point, and then also around at Clement Taylor. So I think this might be a really good opportunity for us to get another great piece of waterfront property. Mr. Tatum did acknowledge that they would be willing to discuss price, so they might not necessarily be firm on that. But I did want to present this to the council and the mayor and see what all y'all felt, if it was something that y'all thought might be good to pursue.
We might know more after the county commissioners get done with their little meeting as far as how much money they're willing to put in there. But yeah, I mean, there's not much of that left.
My biggest concern would be that dock. That dock would have to go, you know, or we build our own dock.
Yeah, if we were going to do like a kayak or a paddleboard type thing, you'd want some kind of little dock, you know, but maybe not that extensive. And that's already a restricted area anyway, so removing that dock would actually be a plus for that portion of the harbor, in my opinion.
Mayor, have you been to that piece? And
Nope, but I'm going to go.
yeah, because
I didn't know it existed.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's just perfectly suited right there with that waterfront. It's next to Marbella.
And I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but being a lawyer, I almost feel compelled that it's impossible to resist. The issue with that dock is that clearly they've got some previous owner signed some agreements for riparian rights in the same way that the fishing fleet did with the previous owner of the Royal Melvin Heritage Park for the permission to put that dock spur out in front of their property. And just because we're the city and we buy it, it doesn't mean we can just kick them out. So contractually, we would have to do some research on what in fact is going on.
Yeah, it's not their mistake.
And no, it's not. It was clearly somebody gave something very valuable for the right to be able to do that. And so there may be hang-ups on what kind of money we can access from a grant standpoint to buy that type of land, because it would likely be encumbered for many, many years by some sort of riparian lease in front of it. And Maybe, maybe not, but I think it is worthy of looking into. And keep
Oh,
in
the
mind.
irony, I have to say. Oh,
Yeah, well,
the irony.
but here's something else to keep in mind. One of the biggest pots of money that this city has tapped into has been the Florida Forever Land Trust money, which is administered by our friends at the DEP. So, this is where that money to acquire this could likely come from. We got to keep it in mind that it's all part of the portfolio of what we're spending now and what we've dedicated already for beach acquisitions over the next 10 years, because we have decided as a council that 75% of all the half-cent sales tax money that will be coming into the city over the next 10 years will be used for beach acquisitions. But it is worthwhile. I'd probably say if you want to give staff the instructions to pursue it. We do have a grant writer, and we also have the ability to chase down some grant money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
But I'm in support of it. It's worthwhile to look into.
for sure. And so I would then direct staff to go ahead and pursue this and reach out to Stephen Tatum. I assume someone has his contact information, since he offered himself up as the contact for the owner and the sales. So yeah, if you could do that and just look into, what encumbrances it might have, what the possibilities might be, and then, all of us can take a look at it. Gary can go out in his boat and get an up-close personal view.
But you can tell by the dock.
Oh, the way it's angled, for sure. It's interesting.
There's probably some attached to it. We just have to find out.
Yeah. Which might make it a really good opportunity to negotiate. So, okay. Well, that's all I have for tonight. So, thank y'all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mitchell.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Mayor,
Yes.
was that a motion, ma'am?
I think it was direction.
Okay.
Just,
I can make it a motion if,
just a consensus type direction. Just gives Webb something else to do. But I'll help you on that. Well, we'll go take a look at it.
If I could just tell you one little fact on that property that I'm aware of, I do know that there's a master development plan in DO that includes a marina that's actively on there, and I know that that is permanent as part of the master development plan, so just for your information.
Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
Okay, Mayor. My first point was, I guess, a duplicate. I didn't realize Dr. Ramswell was going to have that on the agenda, but I will just bring up a couple of questions that weren't covered, because obviously Dr. Ramswell didn't have some of the information I had. Lisa, in one of your emails, you had mentioned that you were waiting on DEP to tell you what survey you needed. Obviously, you got the information you needed to allow us to get this quote, correct?
They have not reached out to us. Ms. Kim?
Okay. All right, let me go backwards then. Okay, that's a surprise. Okay, just to put this in sequence, in a couple of emails that I had back and forth with Lisa, first of all, we had gone out to look for a bid. This was the email, the flow of the email. We were going out to go for a bid to get a quote for a survey, I'm sorry. And then we got notified, we reached out to DEP after the fact, asking them what do they need. So if we still haven't gotten the information from DEP on what we need, what are we going to spend that $8,000 to $10,000 on?
Okay, so first, we were waiting for DEP to send us an application. They sent us the application, and Ms. Diana said, go with the mean high water. So that's what we did. We sent that, Michael sent that to the surveyor, and then DEP came back and said, well, maybe we need to go with the coastal. And she was going to check on that, and we have not heard anything. I guess we're on 2 weeks now. So that's when we just, Ms. Kim came up with what we thought we should be doing, and 30 to 50 feet from the coastline of the embayments, and we sent that off to see how much it would be for the survey. So we have an idea on that. We sent that to Miss Diana, and maybe we'll hear something back from her. So we haven't committed that money yet.
Okay, so we're going to wait for DEP to tell us what we want, what they want, before we move forward with a survey.
Councilor Mitchell, I've talked to Scott Smith. He's a surveyor with Baskerville Donovan. He has done many submerged land leases with DEP. We have forwarded him the representative's contact information, and he will be contacting her directly. So he will do one survey, and it should dot all the I's and cross all the T's, so we'll get it right the first time.
So again, we're going to wait till we get a definitive answer from DEP before we get the survey, correct? That's a yes or no?
Yes, I would think that's what we're going to do. I mean, it would, we're kind of at a dead end. We are doing everything we can to put the application in. We need the survey to finish the application. So we're not going to, the map.
Let me clarify a little bit, because I think that's a little bit of a mischaracterization. Staff is not waiting on DEP to tell staff what staff wants in the survey. We have what I described earlier to, I think it was Councilmember Braden, or whoever asked the question. I said we are going to go 30 to 50 feet out from the most seaward point of the embayments. And that's what's going to be in the survey. However, in DEP's application, there are several details that need to be included in that survey, and so those requirements will be met, and the surveyor will work with DEP to ensure that their requirements are met as we ask for what we want from DEP.
Okay. I'll just move on.
I have a question. If you, Mr. Mitchell, do you mind if I have a
question?
No, ma'am.
So
I'm just curious, because I'm the one that brought this forward and sat down and had a meeting with staff, and I have gotten no update whatsoever. And apparently there's all this other stuff going on, and I know clearly y'all can reach out and talk to anybody on the council you want, but if there's all this information going back and forth, and wouldn't you at least reach out and somebody tell me who's wanting to know what's going on and requested it 2 months ago?
It is on the tracking, the council tracking.
Yeah, but not all this stuff he's saying tonight.
Dr. Ramswell, let me clarify this. I wasn't going to go into all the details, but I think for clarity, okay? What transpired is, actually, I didn't ask for anything. I got an email from staff asking me a question, asking me about intent and square footage. I responded to that request from staff. I didn't go to them asking anything. They asked me a question and I responded. That's what precipitated the back and forth dialogue with Lisa. Again, I'm not faulting staff about anything, but again, this is a situation where the email traffic that I got kind of contradicts itself. At one point, the first email said, and I'm paraphrasing, that we're going out to request a bid. Well, if you're going to request a bid, you obviously know what you're asking for. The second email said, we're waiting on the state to tell us what we need in the survey. So again, just to satisfy you or to respond to you, I didn't go to them for anything. They had asked me a few questions and I was simply responding to them. This whole process, it's been troubling to me from the beginning because, as you said, you made the motion May 4th. It wasn't assigned, from the information I have, it wasn't even assigned to anybody from staff until June 16th. 31 days went by and nobody did anything. And now we're 2 months into it and we're still waiting and don't have an application. With that said, everybody's given us what they have and we'll move forward. But that's the answer regarding the emails. I was asked a question and I simply responded to it.
No, and I'm not, this is nothing against you. I mean, anybody can ask a question, and of course, but I'm just confused because I didn't know any of these details, and it is what it is. I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, and I know y'all are doing the best you can, but I guess I'm confused. Poor Lisa, I mean, why, I guess I don't understand why our land use attorney isn't heading this up. I mean, is this something, and maybe I'm wrong. I mean,
I'm not heading it up because it was not directed to me from anyone on council or the city manager. The city manager directed it to the Parks and Rec director, so she headed it up per his direction. At that point, the Parks and Rec director asked questions directly to council members. I was not in the loop at that point. After I heard about those questions being asked is when I became involved, because I was able to explain the intent to staff. And at this point, I'm now involved. So.
No, I got it. It just seems like it went out of sequence somewhere, and I would have just thought you'd be sort of spearheading it, and then, of course, Lisa would reach out as needed, or whomever else would reach out. But it seems like you came in towards at the end, and I mean, I don't know how many you've done, and maybe it's normal for a Parks and Rec person to do this sort of thing, and maybe I'm completely out of line, but I want to make sure that the right people were handling this. And Lisa, I mean, was this something you were comfortable with doing, or, well, I don't know, that's putting you on the spot. I don't want to make, are you okay?
I mean, I just asked for guidance from the people that know what to, I asked Kim for guidance, and
sure.
So we've been working together.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'm a little bent out of shape that I knew nothing when this was sort of something I was really passionate about and brought forward now 2 months ago, and hearing someone else has more information on it than I do, and I don't know who would have been tasked with telling me what was going on or whatever, but I'm airing my thoughts. So anyway, thank y'all for what you're doing. I know it's not easy, and there's a whole process of contacting people and getting it all done, but just like we talk about communication and making sure everybody knows what's going on, I was totally out of the loop. So,
I have a question. Was this on the action agenda, the document that we get put out every week where we're at?
the item itself is on the tracking, but not all the detail that I was hearing.
Status of it wasn't? Just that it was there? How?
Yeah, I mean, every week it's exactly where we've been. All this just took place, actually, today, right? A lot of it.
And it'll be in the next action agenda.
Where we are, yes.
Where we're at and what took place.
On Wednesday evening, everything that takes place gets put on there. You get it on Friday.
All right, so we'll start reading them a lot better. Mr. Mitchell, keep going. You still got a lot of things.
Sir. Yes, we do. And just to conclude on that, I'll thank staff for what they're doing. Obviously, it's been 2 months, and hopefully we can just get rolling on this. Item 2, before I start on my second item, is Miss Bell still there?
Yes, she is.
Could she come to the podium? I have a question for her. It plays into what I want to talk about on the number 2. She mentioned something earlier, and I couldn't get a question to her.
And just mention the public record.
It's me, Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court.
Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
Ms. Bell, earlier you talked about agenda, and you mentioned something about you could not read it or you didn't get it. Could you elaborate on that? Because I did not understand what you're referring to.
So normally if I try to look at the agenda and I'm not at Wi-Fi because the files are so large, I can't access them. So I have to wait until I get to Wi-Fi, usually at my house, and it's not a problem. It takes a little while for them to download. I wasn't able to do that at all today. It sat and spun and spun. I don't know why. I was on my own Wi-Fi, but that was the only reason that I asked for the clarification on those particular items, because I really didn't know what the specific parcels were. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I just want to make sure that doesn't really play into what I want to talk about, but I wasn't clear on what you were saying, so I appreciate your information. Thank you.
Okay, just one last statement. So sometimes I get here to the meeting and I haven't looked at the actual agenda packet. So when I'm here, I'm not able to load it up because of the Wi-Fi and the 3G or whatever LTE network that we're on here in the city. I'm not pointing fingers. I was just saying that I couldn't load it up today.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. If you all recall, I made the motion last year regarding our agenda packet to revert back to Thursday instead of Wednesday to allow staff to have more time to get the agenda published. And I made the statement then, hey, make sure you do this or you're going to hear from me. Well, you're hearing from me. Sadly, more times than not, the agenda is not being published timely, meeting the deadline. More importantly, and this is something that Rodney's talking about, we get feedback from community people. I'm getting a lot of feedback on this. For example, Monday, our budget workshop last week, we republished the agenda at noon the day of the thing, and we didn't alert the public that it's been republished. That's where we catch a lot of flack from citizens because they think we're trying to sneak something in on them and we're not doing it. Whatever staff's doing, again, they're working hard. And obviously, they're coming up against a dead fast rule of 12 noon and they're not making that. I would suggest to our city manager at noon, that cutoff, if your staff doesn't have it in, that's it. And let it go to the next council meeting. But we can't keep not following our guidelines. Any response, Lance?
I'm perfectly okay with that. I just need council to understand that sometimes there are matters coming from the city attorneys that need to be on that agenda, and they had not had time to complete those items yet. And I try to balance the need for those to be on there with not meeting the deadline, and in most cases where they're late, I believe that they needed to be on the agenda.
And I appreciate that, but we gave an extra day. I was the one that pushed that, and we're not meeting that. The point being is the mission tempo. You're going to hear me say that over and over. All of our people have a lot of work, more than they can probably handle. So at some point in time, when you have an agenda item and your staff can't get it to you, you're just going to have to cut the line and kick it to the next council meeting. But this is where we get ourselves in a precarious situation with the community, because sometimes the agenda gets republished. We don't advertise that to people, so what they're looking at, they're not actually seeing. Enough of that, but that's that point. Last year, I also asked, and I actually dropped the ball on this, looking into the fact that we would broadcast all of our meetings live. So that way to allow the public to take a look at that. And at that time, staff said they were going to look into it and get back, and I dropped the ball on that, never heard anything. So what's the possibility of us televising? Anything the council's involved in should be televised, live, especially right now with the pandemic.
We have talked with David Kidd, who is the gentleman that operates our cameras and helps us get this to YouTube. We did, as part of our media policy, we did broadcast this via GoToMeeting last week, but we did not publish it till afterwards, to YouTube until the next day. With that said, we did budget extra money this year, and we will be working with Mr. Kidd, if it's the will of the council, in order to ensure that we are able to do a live broadcast of to YouTube of council meetings and workshops.
Okay, do we need a consensus, or do you want me to make a motion? I covered this last year. I thought it was adequate, but do you need a motion or do you need consensus?
I prefer a motion.
Make a motion that we broadcast all of our meetings, be it workshop or council meetings, live on YouTube.
Second.
I got a motion, I got a second.
Wait for Rodney on this one.
I will. I was just going to ask for comment. Any comment? You heard the motion, Rodney? Okay.
I got one.
Go ahead, Mr. Marlar.
What's the cost to the city on all of this?
It's about $250 each time.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, opinions? Seeing none? We have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ranswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Continue on, sir.
Okay, continue it every week. You hear me say this, and I can't tell how many people I see every day to complain about it. I realize it's not our responsibility, it's the county, but James Lee Park is continued to have problems. They're having continued parking issues, parking up on the grass. They've already destroyed the new curb in some areas that's been built. We're also the fence and everything else that we've reached out to the county countless times and asked for help. It's still a deplorable situation. Again, it's not our responsibility, but I hope the more I bring it out, maybe somebody will pay attention and get something done on it.
I think we've already sent a letter or two.
I know, and it's fallen on, unfortunately, it hadn't helped. It's just sad they made such a beautiful area there, and literally, and I stopped sending photographs because I can send you photographs every day of illegally parked cars, but the new curb out there has actually been broken and chipped already with cars rolling over and illegally parking. Anyway, enough said on that. In our last meeting, we mentioned that our tow contract would probably go into effect July 1st. What's the status on that?
We are able to tow right now, and I was able to get the documents to the land use attorney, and we're going to go ahead and have the interlocal drawn up probably within the next meeting or two. Yep. So we'll probably bring that back to you for final review next meeting or two for the interlocal agreement.
Okay. All right. How many times, anybody have a guess how many times I've talked about Airport Road this year? Anybody want to venture a guess?
15?
Okay. Yeah, well, I guess that would be low. In our last meeting, staff specifically said that the construction of that would be slated for this summer. On the 2nd of this month, in our weekly project tasking sheet, under item 005, I believe it is, the entry states, this is from Mike Burgess, on 4/8/20, per our tasking sheet, it says, update. Michael spoke with Colby Brown with GPI Engineering this week. Finalized plans for the curb improvements are scheduled for May, with construction slated for this summer, which that goes part and parcel what we just heard at the last meeting, that things would be moving forward. Well, folks, on July the 2nd, we also got, each and every one of us got an email from FDOT. And that email told us that the 60% plan was complete, with DOT requesting comments on that 60% plan as of July 23rd, 2020. I contacted the program manager from FDOT, and I spoke with him after I got that email. And I asked him, this is the 60% plan, which obviously means construction's not going to move forward. When is the final draft due on Airport Road? And his answer to me was February or March of next year, of 2021. I then asked him, well, when do you think construction is going to take place? Probably July or August of next year. This is not staff's fault. Staff only relays what's given to them. But my question is, how do we keep getting this stuff wrong over and over and over? This is incredible that we get, Michael didn't do anything wrong. Staff didn't do anything wrong. They're relaying what they got. But how come we keep getting bad information? Can anybody speak to that?
I guess that's directed at you, Michael.
Okay. After the last meeting, I reached out to Michael Lewis. He is the safety engineer for District 3 out of Chipley. And I emailed him, I said, I realize you've all experienced some delays in the design and, of course, the subsequent construction start date. I need a reasonable time frame for this project moving forward, as one of our council persons, and that's you, Councilor Mitchell, will be bringing this subject up at tonight's meeting. And his reply was, Michael, I was premature in discussing schedule with you back in January, and that's when we first were having these discussions. I did not consider that we would be starting our design phase from square one. Also, various delays including the pandemic occurred. Our current schedule is for the plans to be completed in November, because you all got the 60% last week, and we will then begin the arrangements to construct using one of our safety push-button contracts. Construction office will give us a completion date when we get to the construction phase.
There you go.
Well, I think you need to talk to him again, because my conversation with them basically trumped that one when he pushed it back. So again, it's just incredibly disappointing. We have been working on this for years and years and years. And again, it's just frustrating because the public expects us to get something done, and through no fault of anyone in that room, none of us, we keep getting bad information time and time again. Whether it's FDOT lying to us about the caution light on top of the bridge, over and over and over. We can play games and say, oh, we got to be nice to these people. I'm tired of getting bad information and, quite frankly, being lied to. Enough of that. It's ridiculous, because the public expects stuff to get done, and we're not doing it. The other question I have is, and let me make sure you understand, this is not staff's fault. I'll say it again. You're only relaying the information you're given. It's not your fault. It's just we're getting bad information that's being passed on. Lance, over the weekend, I know you sent out an email about Osteen and whatnot. There was also apparently some sort of issue along Silver Shells and along with beach chairs and all that. We got a couple of phone calls on that. Are you aware of that? And are we doing anything about that issue above and beyond the Osteen stuff?
Yes, I believe Mr. Forgione can address that. He sent his guys out there.
Yeah, Osteen, I sent out an officer to make contact with the property owner and to see about getting that spray painted up. I'll get a follow-up in the morning on that. I'll look at the case file. And then the one that's on for your beach vendors, that's a code violation down in there. And we've taken care of that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Let's see, yes, Ms. Overdeer.
Yeah, I had one item, and Lance, I apologize, I should have asked you this when we met this morning, but if we got any update on that, on Underground Inc. doing that project on Coleman Lake outfall?
Did you say Coleman Lake?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I had a conversation with Mr. Buckingham today, and we are trying to work out the final details on getting that project rolling right now.
So then it'll go out to bid?
We will not need to, as long as we stick to the plan that we're currently under, because it will not exceed the $15,000.
Okay, but so it'll be Underground Inc. that'll be doing it, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thanks.
Is that all, Skip?
That's it.
All right, thank you. Mr. Marler.
One quick item, since it was brought up earlier when we were talking about the abatements. On the harbor side of the Noriega Point, I'd like to have somebody look at the fact, I think we need to move the boat restrictions back. I think we're getting a bottleneck again because of the various larger boats at the entrance to the harbor. At one time we had about 100 foot. I don't know exactly how many feet we need to go back, but I think our due diligence would be to do, to back the boats back up a little bit more in the harbor. I think we're getting a lot of congestion at the entrance there between the charter boats, the cruise boats, all the different boats that are there, plus our wonderful kayaks and paddle boards and all that stuff that are all over the place. I just think we need to look at a more safety conscious of backing putting the no parking out further, I guess you'd call it further east. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Marler. It's a challenge every day, especially when you got 2 trips. Just like we say, keep your head on a swivel, Cap, when you're going through there. It's pretty impressive. Mr. Destin.
Nothing tonight, Mayor, other than, again, thanks to my fellow council members for support on the Building Heights referendum.
Thank you, sir. Awesome. Mr. Morgan.
Skip covered what I was going to talk about with Coleman Lake, and Lance and I had talked last week about it. And, if staff was coming up with any problems with the project, just bring them to city council and see if we can't help make some decisions to move it forward, because I think the neighbors or the folks who live on that lake are ready to get it done. But thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. I only got 2 items. One is the census. The last report I got 3 or 4 days ago was Okaloosa County was at 56% respondents. They haven't gone door to door yet. I think we can do better than that. I want to encourage everyone watching online and to put it on the public record that you need to get on the census.com, 2020census.com, and take 7 to 8 minutes max to fill out your census. For a city like Destin that relies on federal grant money and state grants and stuff like that, being counted as a resident of this city is tremendously important. So I just want to encourage everyone to get online and fill out your census form. And if I could ask all the council members and their social media and stuff like that, just encourage everyone to do that. I'll do the same, so we can try to get our percentages up. At some point here soon, they're going to be sending folks door to door to try to get the folks that don't do that.
Mayor, did you say the city or the county?
Did you publish any Destin figures?
The county's at 56%. I'm not just sure exactly where the city's at, but it's part of that 56. Go ahead, sir. What'd you say, Skip?
No, I was just wondering if you had a breakdown of what percentage Destin was at.
I did not see that, but I'll look it up, and I'll have Lance forward that out to everyone. But
okay.
I think it was Friday, we were at 56%, and there was, that's not good enough, really. We need to do better than that. And lastly, I just want to talk about, our visioning document that we all did the workshop, and we all agreed and voted to set our priorities, and our staff has X amount of man hours a day, X amount of man hours a week, X amount of man hours a month. And so what I'd really like for us to do, and this is just as mayor, and try to provide a little encouragement, is that we all take a step back and look at where we need to go to move forward. Some of the issues we're trying to deal with, or we're actually looking behind us to try to fix some of that. That's a good thing. But I would like for us to enter into the fall really focusing on our visioning statement and moving in that direction. We've accomplished a lot that's on that list, or nearly accomplished. Our intergov is really a tremendous accomplishment. Our land use, the improvements in our community development department is right on the cusp of really setting us up for the next decade or two. And then our beach acquisition, we're almost on the cusp of actually buying some beach and having some parks. So just as mayor and just to the council, I just ask that we kind of take a step back, kind of review the visioning statement and our goals and stuff like that, and see all the things that we can do to try to make some of this stuff come to fruition, even before the next election cycle. So that's all I have for tonight. That leads you, Ms. Kopp.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Bowman.
Nothing.
All right.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I got a question for our city attorney.
Go ahead.
Kyle, can you give an update on the where you are on that review from May the 18th regarding Section 309?
Probably next meeting.
Okay, doke. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Is that all?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, at this point, this is the tail end of our meeting, and we will open up for public comment. Ray, I'll recognize you after our speakers are done, because I know you have an email to read, right? Go ahead, Marcy. Oh, go throw me a curveball. Come on up. Just state your name and your address.
Okay. Becky Pritchard, 145 Timber Court. And I just wanted to say that I had a code issue this weekend on July 4th at about 9 o'clock in the morning. And Danny Sullivan, I believe is his name, took care of it in 15 minutes. So just wanted to say thank you. And is Danny here?
Nobody's boss is.
Oh, okay. I mean, returned my phone call and took care of it in 15 minutes. So it was awesome. And thank y'all for everything else you've done.
Thank you so much. That's a good way to end the meeting. Come on up, Marcy.
Last but not least, Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. To finish up with what I was saying earlier, I wanted to make a statement that I attended the Beach Committee meeting last week, and I also attended the Parks and Recreation Committee. I should have been attending those things a long time ago. They're very informative, and if you're missing anything about those items, if you attend, you will know that they're doing a really great job. I also have had great experience with code compliance over the past couple of times that I've been in contact, or for a while, I should say. I also wanted to thank you for mentioning the visioning document. I think it's an important document that you guys had put out before COVID became an issue. And in that, I also want to state that at one of the meetings that I attended last week, before I say that, Gulf Breeze is known as being a speed trap. Nobody speeds through Gulf Breeze. If Destin and Okaloosa County were known as places where you get towed, you get tickets for parking in the wrong place, and you get tickets for throwing out garbage and litter, then maybe we would have a cleaner place instead of a trashed up place. Just putting it out there. So hopefully with the visioning document we can put that into place where maybe we can do that and be the speed trap of trash and parking. And the last thing is I will also put out a census post for your, yes, I've sent mine in, but I will make a post. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. Ray, you have something that needs to be read in the public record?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. Last question from Ms. Michelle Melanson, 111 Gulf Winds Court. Is there a code that addresses properties in Destin that are not maintained? Property that have missing siding, need of paint, broken awning, pieces hanging, etc. Properties that are an eyesore. Is this covered by code department? If it is not part of city code, I am asking that this be considered to be added to city code as it affects property value of surrounding property. Okay, that's one. I would like, okay.
Yes, it's covered by city code, and if someone has a complaint, they should contact the code compliance department directly.
I would like to bring to the attention of the city that the issue of the monkey being brought to the beach that I mentioned last meeting is a real issue. This monkey can become aggressive and attack as it is a wild animal and is very protective of its owner. I was told by Animal Control Officer Kathleen Healy that City of Destin stated that the monkey is allowed on the beach. If that is so, then when this monkey bites someone, the city will have liability.
Joey, would you like to answer that?
Yes, there's no animals allowed on our beaches, period. And having said that, Sheriff's Office has come in contact with her in the past. Code enforcement has come in contact in the past. I'm asking them to contact us when the monkey's on the beach, not off the beach, so we can catch that and we'll issue a citation.
No monkeys. No animals. No pet squirrels. Nothing. Okay.
Roosters.
Roosters.
No roosters.
Uh,
No good or bad roosters allowed on the beach.
On the beach.
Okay, is there any other comments? Did you have anybody queued up over there?
No, sir.
That being said, meeting adjourned.